Nope, I just didn't turn the page that way. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that would be nice if they do that. Okay.
Hey, how are you?
Well, yourself?
All right. What's new on Oriole Road?
Graduation parties are over, so, kinda
So-
calming down, I guess.
Oh, so people will be moving out.
You'd think, but, one of my neighbors, I think she got one left, but then the other two just graduated and moved home. So,
Yeah, you gotta downsize fast.
well, she had two graduate, she had one graduate high school, but two graduate college and then moved home, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly, yeah, you gotta thread the needle, I
yeah,
guess,
it's
right?
just, yeah, thin window of opportunity, get the hell out.
Yeah. Things pretty calm. Medfield,
Medway, yeah. Yeah,
very positive.
what?
Very positive.
Yeah. Yeah, Medway went through its hard times and it's in pretty good shape now.
See Jack Wolf on the warrant committee down there, maybe?
Well, it's called a FinCom, but yeah. There's actually somebody's unexpired term, which would be perfect for him.
Yeah. Yeah, it took me a minute to get used to rename the names of the committees, because Indetta may have the FinCom and the committee.
Well, the premise is to emphasize that they're responsible for general oversight, not just budgetary things. So,
Very fair. Random question, was there a annual report besides the annual warrant report that came out?
there should have been, yeah.
Cause someone asked me about that, and
I think they cut back on the number of copies, hard copies they make, because
right, I understand that,
It's
but how
avail-
often it's
yeah.
even on the website, so like
I'm trying to think if I picked it up or not.
I know they changed this, I know they, for the annual one, they changed the format, it was the big print one, for the
The warrant
ATM.
report,
Right,
Right.
the ATM. But for the regular one, I haven't seen one, but then looking on the website, I didn't see one either, so.
I'm pretty sure they do come out, I saw boxes of them.
things take time. There's somebody who, there was someone someone I met who said they were interested in the assistant town administrator role. And they were saying, I found everything but except that. And I said, I hadn't seen that myself, so kind of prompted.
Yeah, I think with Mike Sullivan's passing and other things, it just got pushed back.
Well, I know that with the whole budget thing, with the schools and again threading needle on that one. You know, the nerds are restless. You know, there's probably enough online you can be busy.
That's just a recap of last year, so.
Is there a reason why some towns, again, like I don't care, but things are there or not, but is there a reason why some towns publish the, like the salaries of all the employees in the annual one and some don't?
No, there's,
Purview?
the annual report is basically a town clerk function,
Okay,
and it's basically basic records.
okay,
Some town clerks choose to put that salary stuff in, others don't.
okay.
It's like the big source of controversy in Franklin, because Franklin's a city form of government, they don't even have to do it at all. But God forbid if they eliminated that. And it's out of date, I mean, that's essentially data that's 2 years old as far as what people are getting.
Right, true. Yeah, I'm thinking the Webster one, but then I think they even, at some point, that dropped off of there too, probably just because it was more work than was needed and there wasn't any response. You know, they probably tried it 1 year and then any good flea market finds?
We went up to the Grafton, has a outdoor one on the common antique show last Saturday.
Okay.
Actually, for $5, picked up a piece that would have been used to create, take a doll and make it a screw,
Okay, interesting.
so. It was worth a lot more than $5. I was pleased with that. We did Brimfield back in May, it was very disappointing.
My big swap find was a piece of sterling mounted glassware. It's like a wine claret. It's like, you know, I saw similar ones online selling for like $500 to $1,000. I think it was just included with a bunch of plate,
Yeah,
you know, sterling. And I saw a lady handling it, and when she was handling it, I saw the hallmarks on it, and I said, those aren't plate hallmarks.
oh yeah, right.
I mean, they were heavy in it. I think it's from like the 1830s or something. It's like John Wilman Fig something.
Hmm.
But at first I was like, well, you know, it's the silver, it's cool. But then when I looked at the whole thing, you know, the glass was intact, so. But I'm lazy, I haven't got around to pawing it off, so.
So where'd you get it?
At the swap,
Oh, the swap.
yeah.
Yeah, you can get good stuff at the swap. It's amazing some of the stuff people just throw out around here. Even knowing the value, they just don't want
Sure.
anymore.
Well, you're moving and stuff, and it's
Yeah.
the last stuff you have. And
Yeah.
most of a lot of the toys in my house gotta be from there.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Remember me? Bill Kelleher.
Bill, how are you? It's been years.
How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Well, surviving. A little bumpy right now.
Yeah,
So how you doing?
all right,
Still doing this, huh?
yeah. Take a day at a time,
Hey.
so. You've been retired for a while, right?
Oh, yeah. Turned 65 this year.
Oh, really? I'm 68, so.
You get your fingers in all those little towns, though. You're a busy man.
You keep going, you still with the Lions Club?
No. I left probably 15 years ago.
That's about when I left, too.
And, you know, my daughter and grandkids are in my big house here. We went to Franklin.
Oh, okay. We're in Franklin.
You know, we're heading towards Walmart. There's a Cumberland Farms on 126. You go straight like 109.
Yeah,
You don't take the hook. Just go straight
Yeah,
towards
yeah.
Walmart. There's a Cumberland Farms.
Yes.
Take a left there.
yeah,
We're down there. It's not too bad. Convenient. The house is smaller.
is that Charles River Farms?
What's that?
Is that Charles River Farms?
No, it's actually right on the Bellingham.
Yeah, that's where Charles River Farms, Dover Farms, Dover Farms.
Dover Farm. No, I don't know where they are. We got the line. The line goes right through the property.
Yeah,
Two towns.
no, I know what you're talking about.
It's all right.
Yes, I didn't realize. I know my cousin's in the war.
See what's going on
Very
here.
well, but I never knew the elevator tables. I don't know what it is.
Little town stuff. You know?
Yeah,
He lives in Sanibel. And so, yeah, they were all texting.
Well, it's good to see you.
yeah, I'm glad you
I
identified
see you out
yourself.
walking around once in a while. We're here all the time. We're babysitting the kids, so.
Yeah. I walk when I try to walk when I can, so.
Right, I said, I texted my aunt.
Hey, they even lost the building down there now. I don't know, where do they meet?
They've been meeting in Dover,
What?
at the Legion in
Oh,
Dover.
okay, yeah,
Oh, we're talking about you. Yeah,
all right.
It's funny, I was walking down here one day and I saw this traffic commotion. A car was supposed to come out of Dunkin' Donuts and the car behind him was hitting the horn. It was like a road rage incident. And it's like this old guy in the who's not moving out into the street. The next thing I know, the car comes across and he's yelling at me out the window and he pulls into CVS. It was Steve Kramer.
I haven't seen him in ages.
Well, he's gotten old
I
too.
haven't seen him since the brick fell on his head at the Christmas trees.
Oh,
Oh, well. You bump into people once in a while.
yeah, it's good. Know the people are still around.
Hey, it's keeps you busy, moving around, keeps you young, as young as you can be. All right.
Take care, Bill.
Take care.
Mr. Murby, how are you?
Good. Busy day. Busy week.
What?
It'll be an interesting meeting.
Oh, she is, but she works at home.
chance to get organized on this one. Yeah, Mike? Good. Not the most organized. Not sure about that stuff.
I think Rob Gregg might lead the town of Medfield in standing us up. He's like, how many times has he been on our agenda?
Yes.
Yeah, it just gets postponed, something else happens.
We go for streaks now, right?
Right.
Let's see.
Not one to take things personally.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
You need to think we're not a high priority for.
Right.
Chief?
Let's see what we got here. Hey, Chief, how you doing? How's that vacation?
I understand, I realize already. Well, I appreciate you making that happen.
Oh, that's good. He's after you. Oh, well, that's smart.
Hey, Pete.
So, Pete,
Pete, how you
I
doing?
just want to, yep,
minutes I have not had any time.
yep,
Went
nope.
through a few of them.
Should go
Some
to
of them were, some of them
presentation
on the
mode.
schedule weren't in the.
Same.
All
Yep.
right. I found 3 that matched.
There you go. You can use the arrow or you can use that.
Field Cable TV. We're good? Okay. I guess we can go ahead and begin pretty much on time. So good evening. Welcome to the June 18th, 2019 Medfield Board of Selectmen's meeting. Just at the start of the meeting, I want to disclose this meeting is being video recorded and at least broadcast by Medfield Cable TV and I think live streamed. So if you have any questions or comments over the course of the meeting, if you could identify your name, your address here in Medfield, and make sure that you have a microphone so that the audio gets picked up. The microphone isn't for the room, it's for being picked up on the Medfield broadcast, the Medfield TV broadcast. So if you could do that, we'd appreciate it. I am still delinquent in tracking down the actual names of service members. I started this, I need to see it through. However, I would ask that we start the meeting with a moment of appreciation for the troops that are serving, defending our country throughout the world, and in particular, in light of the fact we have 1,000 additional service members that are being sent over to the Middle East, that we in particular think of them this week. Thank you. Okay, we have one appointment that's canceled, so we only have one appointment to talk about, and that's the Medfield Youth Outreach. So we'll turn the floor, and Chelsea, go ahead and it's all yours. Okay.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today and hear a little bit about our program and what we do. I'm here as a representative of the Medfield Youth Outreach Department. I'm also here with some members of our advisory board and Board of Health representative, Carol, sorry to put you on the spot. And I prepared a very short presentation that kind of hits just some quick bullet points about, some of the more in-depth information I provided in the packet. And I'm happy to answer any questions along the way. So again, my name is Chelsea. I am currently the interim director of Medfield Youth Outreach, and I'm happy to provide kind of an overview of what our department does. So just kind of a brief, quick snapshot of our governance structure. When we are fully staffed, we are a two-person department of 2 full-time staff members. I formerly occupied the role of youth outreach worker, and there is a youth outreach director who the worker reports to. We got an advisory board within the past couple of years, and the Youth Outreach Department meets with the advisory board on a monthly basis for oversight and guidance. However, the program itself is under the auspices of the Board of Health and has been since its inception in 1979. And I'll go into the history a little bit in a second, but from a personnel standpoint, the Youth Outreach worker reports directly to the Youth Outreach Director, who in turn reports to the town administrator. And of course, all of this is overseen by you as a Board of Selectmen. Just a quick little snapshot there. Our current advisory board is comprised of these members. Some of them are here today: Kathleen Cahill, Molly Frankel, Mariana Cortese, Michelle Manganello, Liz Sandeman, Jen Sullivan, and Kathy Thompson. And these are our current board members. I know that we're kind of in the process of recruiting some new board members as well to maintain continuity with youth and to kind of reach out to other sectors to get a broader representation from the community. And again, as I kind of touched on, I did some digging to kind of research about the history of this department. It has been around for 40 years. It was adopted as a town department in 1979, and at that time it became a Medfield Board of Health program. And again, in that same year, the youth outreach worker who had been doing work through a nonprofit organization in town was adopted as a town employee. And that's just, if you're interested, a little quote at the bottom that I found in the annual town report from 1979. That kind of covers some of the purposes of the outreach department at the time, which included crisis intervention, short-term counseling, and referrals to other social service agencies. Since 1979, those services have definitely expanded, but the core of those services still remain. Just to give you kind of a quick overview of the scope of this department's work, our mission is to serve youth ages 0 to 18 and their families with a host of social services. Clinical counseling is one of the main components of what we offer to the town. We provide free and confidential individual and mental health family counseling. Any resident in the town of Medfield is able to access our services. So while we serve youth and their families for clinical counseling, we actually provide services across the age spectrum to residents in terms of needs-based assistance and information and referrals. So the people I see for clients are kids and teens, but I also work with members of across all demographic categories who need assistance in connecting to resources. Our program kind of acts as a hub to connect residents to anything that they might need. So oftentimes, someone might come into our office with one question or one idea in mind and actually walk out with like 8 more referrals to things they didn't even know they might qualify for. So that is one of the benefits of the location and of the, again, that kind of hub of services we offer. We kind of are able to be a one-stop shop for residents. So in addition to that clinical counseling I mentioned, we don't have our own funds to be able to provide residents, but we refer them to financial assistance resources. So that can include the food cupboard, other food resources like food stamps. There's a place called A Place to Turn Natick that offers, it's kind of like another food cupboard for the region. We refer people to different government programs. We're a fuel assistance intake site for anybody in town under the age of 50. We're kind of tasked with that, and anybody who walks through our door, we help them fill out those fuel assistance applications. We've referred people to New Life Furniture Bank. We refer people to a ton of different things. Those are kind of the needs-based referrals that we might refer someone to. We are the liaison with the Angel Run Fund, so we don't actually manage the funds themselves, but we make the confidential referrals for residents who are in need of some assistance to that fund. In addition to kind of that clinical and needs-based, we also coordinate 2 prevention coalitions in town. So there's Medfield Cares About Prevention, which focuses on reducing and preventing youth substance use, and that's been around for many years. We also are coordinating the Medfield Coalition for Suicide Prevention, which is a newer coalition. It started 2 years ago. And that kind of arose in response to community concerns about recent suicide attempts and deaths of young people. In addition, those are kind of our 3 main things: needs-based, clinical, and prevention work. But again, we provide crisis intervention and community programming in response to identified needs. So we're constantly evolving to meet the needs of the community. This is kind of another way of looking at what I just talked about. Just a little graphic to show, again, we're a hub that connects a bunch of disparate resources and brings them together so that it's easier for residents to access the services to which they qualify. And it's colorful. So with that as kind of a brief overview of some of the services we provide in the history of our department, as I said, we fully staffed are a 2-person department. Right now, our longtime director, Don Alcott, recently left, so we are down to 1 staff member, me. And we are hoping to fill that role with a qualified professional as soon as possible. The needs in this community in terms of mental health and financial assistance are only growing. We've seen that trend, in the past 5 years, and we predict that that's going to continue to grow. Our recent Metro West Adolescent Health Survey data shows that the mental health needs and substance misuse numbers are only increasing among our youth. And so we feel very strongly that, getting another mental health professional to fill this empty role is very important and very timely. So we are here today, and I say we as myself and our board and the Board of Health. We're here to, again, give a scope of what we offer and to the community, and to request that we move forward in the process of hiring a new director. And that is kind of my very brief presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Sure. Thank you very much. And I appreciate that the written materials were extraordinarily helpful.
I'm glad.
So, And I want to thank you both for the written materials and not for reiterating all of the written materials again in your oral presentation.
I talked to my board about that before. I said, I'm not going to read the whole thing.
Yes,
So
thank you. Thank you on both of those counts. So I have two overarching questions. I won't call them concerns, they're sort of questions. And
Sure.
I think some of it is answered here, and both of them relate to the counseling aspect of what we do. Because I think the rest of it strikes me as, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but it strikes me as what you'd see from a typical town administration. It's the administration of programs, administration of events, and the rest of it that falls into the kind of work that a town government does. The concern with the counseling end of it is both an oversight question, and sort of oversight if there are complaints, if there are concerns. Mark may be able to answer this, but in terms of insurance coverage for the town's liability if issues come up in that process. And then the second piece of it is, it mentions in the report that this is done sort of a needs blind basis.
yes.
And I have zero objection to providing the services to people who can't otherwise afford it. I do have concerns about, to the extent, if we are at all, providing services to people who could otherwise afford it.
Sure.
And so those are the two questions that I have, the two areas of questions that I have. So if you want to respond to either of those, or
Yeah, I can respond to both.
Sure.
In terms of oversight in the clinical supervision piece and the kind of liability insurance piece, I can tell you that I carry my own liability insurance as a licensed social worker, as did Dawn when she was in her role. There are very strict regulations about maintaining licensure in the state of Massachusetts for social workers. So I'm required to do 30 hours of continuing education every 2 years, and that is a liability issue in terms of keeping up with current trends, making sure I'm constantly practicing, educating myself about mental health needs and how to treat clients. And so in terms of my own professional development, that's something that's required by the state of Massachusetts and something that I would do anyway because I feel like it's ethical to continue to learn and update oneself. In terms of the oversight piece, not only does the director directly clinically supervise a youth outreach worker, we have a clinical consultant, Carol O'Connor, who is not here tonight because she lives far away, but she meets with staff, both the director and the youth outreach worker, regularly to provide clinical supervision. And that is done, again, to have that checks and balances and that extra level of oversight so that pressing clinical issues can be discussed. And Carol is also a licensed independent clinical social worker. And so we're very careful to make sure that we get that supervision and that oversight.
'cause not to interrupt, but as I
sure.
understand it, that at least under the previous director, that the director also would sometimes provide direct counseling services as well.
Yes, exactly. And it's that kind of level of, as a director, even the director needs supervision, right? Not needs, if you're an independent clinical social worker, it's not required to keep your license to get that. But as a department, we decided that that's ethical and that's best practice to always have supervision, whether or not the license requires it. And so the director also would get the services of Carol O'Connor, our clinical consultant, as well.
Because I think from a town perspective, we have to exercise some level of quality control as well. Not to say we haven't, but just from a
Right.
general philosophical perspective, because when somebody is working for the town, it carries with it a certain imprimatur of quality and authority that an independent person would not have. If you go to an independent person, you know you're getting an just like with a solo practitioner, you're going to a solo practitioner. A lawyer, you're getting a solo practitioner. If you go to Brigham and Women's Hospital, you're sort of expecting that there's, that carries with it, you're taking a different kind of a risk, right? But
Right.
if you're taking a solo practitioner, lawyer, you're going to check that individual person out more than you would
Right.
if you just, go into Brigham and Women's Hospital. I think you have a similar function where somebody, if they're being offered as the town, sort of as a counselor employed by the town and offered to people in the town, will carry with it at least some endorsement that the town is applying some level of quality control on it. So that's sort of the origin of the concern. It's not grounded in any complaints or concerns or substantive
No, I
questions
agree.
that I have about what anybody's been doing. It's just this is not a department that we've gotten into the weeds about during my time on the board and before that. So that's why I greatly appreciate this information.
Yeah, and I agree. I think, we're very careful. And when I say we, again, when we're a fully staffed department, any client we take on, we do an intake with, and we assess their needs, and we determine whether or not they would be best served by our staff or by somebody who specializes in the particular mental health issue they're presenting. So I've definitely met with families, met with parents, and have determined this isn't the best fit for them. I'm not the best person who's equipped to serve your child, because that's not my specialty and that's not my training. And so we're very careful before taking on any clients to sit down with the family, sit down with the parents, hear the needs, and assess whether or not they should be referred out or if they can be seen by us. So if it's a really, high needs client, outpatient mental health services, which is the level of care our office provides, is not the best fit. They might need a higher level of care. If somebody is very mentally ill or is struggling with a lot of different complicated needs, they might need a higher level of care, and we make that determination, again, in collaboration with staff when we're fully staffed and with our clinical consultant. So it's always kind of a group decision. It's never made just one person making any kind of decision about taking on a new client or about the care that we're providing.
So then my second area of concern is is about the resource allocation piece of it.
Sure.
And sort of how we're screening potential clients for need. And are we using kind of resources of the town to provide services that to people who could otherwise afford those services themselves?
I agree. That's a great
That's the second
question.
question.
And I can only speak for the 4 years I've been in this department, but from what I've seen, again, we don't have any financial assistance forms that families need to fill out in order to access our clinical care. But from an anecdotal standpoint, I can tell you that by and large, the majority of the clinical clients we see are the most vulnerable members in this community. We often see, and I borrow this phrase from Dawn, multi-problem complex families is often what we see, and that's a really accurate way of capturing the reality of the situation of many of our clients. So, they might be struggling with a mental health issue and are facing eviction and are going through a divorce and need referrals to a domestic violence organization. And we are best equipped to provide resource or information and referrals to those specialized services while providing the care. And so oftentimes, whether it's a financial need that's been longstanding, someone who is at the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder, or a recent change, either a job loss, an illness, or a divorce. That's a lot of what we see, where families who were doing really well suddenly aren't doing so well. That's by and large the majority of the clients that we see. Again, I can't speak for every client, but the people we see truly need it and are not able to access other mental health resources either because they can't afford the copay. They don't have a car to be able to drive, and I can think of several people that applies to who I see right now. Or their parents work, and they can't drive their kid to a mental health appointment, but the kid can walk to our office from the high school or the middle school. And so it's about need and it's about access. I think our office kind of breaks down the barriers to access that a lot of people experience in trying to get mental health treatment. Even families, again, that might be able to afford the copay if they have insurance, they might not be able to get their kid there to get that treatment. So it removes some of those barriers and provides an option among many options for mental health care. So we are one mental health provider among many in this community and the surrounding area.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's all for me.
So I guess I would start by saying that over the course of years, I've had several reasons to be in touch with the youth outreach. I guess the first was that Don got me involved in MCAP, the Medfield Cares About Prevention effort, and the attempt to try to get the federal grant money, the $625,000 SAMHSA, I think it is, grant. Is that the right?
Yes. Yep.
Oh my
Currently
gosh, I
have
can't believe I can remember the name.
It's a lot of acronyms.
Grant monies for the town over 5 years, and so I went to a lot of MCAP meetings and saw youth outreach there. I've been to a lot of meetings with the Medfield Coalition for Suicide Prevention and seen a lot of youth outreach there. And then the other touch that I've had with them is through the the Medfield Foundation, the fact that the Medfield Foundation Angel Run creates tens of thousands of dollars a year that are then turned over to assist families in need through the UCC Church. And that fund is actually administered by Pastor Phil and the Youth Outreach Office together, jointly. And so that the Medfield Foundation hears back from actually, I think we're gonna hear from you tomorrow night, aren't we? Maybe not.
Perhaps.
One meeting at a time, one meeting at a time.
But,
Pete will let you know based on how well you do tonight, whether he wants.
All right, I'm ready.
so I've just seen a lot of the youth outreach, and I've been impressed that it's very entrepreneurial. I think it's very advocacy oriented, I guess I would call it. That they're really reaching out to the people in town to try to provide a lot of services. We don't do a lot of human services in Medfield. It's really the youth outreach, the worker at the Council on Aging. I've also come to think that the police and the fire do a lot of our human services for us as well, because they meet all the people that need the services in their jobs. But I guess I've been impressed with what youth outreach does. There was another point that I was going to make, and I can't remember what it was now. Oh, I know. At one point, you asked Mike about the funding. I asked Dawn at one point, why don't you take insurance? Because everybody has health insurance, and so that and under Massachusetts was one of the first places that mandated that mental health services be covered at least up to 10 visits a year or something of that sort. And I know that Dawn didn't want to do that, but I don't remember exactly why it was. I think it was perhaps the process of doing it was too complicated for a small entity to do. I can imagine that would be the reason, but I don't know.
I can speak to that a little bit about billing, because we have explored that option about billing insurance. And in order to bill insurance, we would need to hire a qualified billing specialist who could ensure that copays are collected properly, that the proper codes are used to bill the proper insurance companies. It's a very complicated process. I certainly don't understand.
Yeah. Well, and maybe that's an opportunity where the fire department actually already does that for the ambulance, and so that maybe there might be some synergies for the youth outreach and the fire department to check in as to whether or not there is an opportunity to tap into people's insurance monies.
And I'd be happy to do that. It's interesting, I am part of a collaboration with Needham, Westwood, and Dedham, and their Youth and Family Services Department. And Needham actually just recently conducted an analysis exploring that. Is it worth us billing insurance? And again, Needham is a different town, but what they found is the cost of hiring a qualified billing specialist and the training involved would not offset the cost of training staff and hiring a billing specialist. Is much higher than any revenue that they would take in.
Yeah.
I can tell you that
Okay.
again, and that's Needham, and Medfield's a different town, so I can't say. But the realities of the reimbursement rates for Mass Health are relatively low compared to other insurance companies, and that is by and large the majority of our clients. I would go so far as to say they have Mass Health. So we would get some reimbursement for our clinical services, but it's a smaller or lower rate than other, like Blue Cross Blue Shield, other private insurance companies. And again, we'd have to hire a staff person to do that. So I'm happy to explore that option. I just think I've had conversations in the past with Dawn about that issue, and that's kind of what she referenced as well, is like, we wouldn't take in enough money to offset that cost of a new staff person.
The only other thing that I would mention is that on NPR, while I was driving here to the meeting, they announced that in a story that the youth suicide was up about 20% over, and I don't remember exactly what the period of years was. It wasn't just 1 year, it was maybe a period of 5 or more years. But it was a fairly dramatic increase in youth suicides, and so the coalition that Youth Outreach is running basically in the town has been very successful. We've got that interface group now, so that anybody in town that needs a mental health referral can call Interface and get a referral to a mental health provider. Your neighbor, Dr. Andrea
Mhm.
Kazu, can you pronounce it?
Well, they're the Haygoods.
She was very successful in getting a couple of the hospitals to commit some money to fund that interface service for the upcoming year. So it looks like it's going to be covered. It's a $13,000 a year cost for the town, but it provides the first step for anybody that needs mental health services to know who to call and who can take their insurance, basically, type of thing. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to answer. Any more questions or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Very few people get through without one of us sitting there with a lot of questions. First question I have, so you're requesting an upgraded position as the director?
Yes,
The Board of Health oversees the Medfield Youth Outreach?
yes.
Has the Board of Health endorsed this request?
Microphone.
I'm not.
That's okay. No, it's just for the people at home.
For the
Oh,
people
I'm
on TV.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm not here speaking for the Board of Health.
It's just, I'm just looking for a statement of
So
whether it
I
has or
will
not.
say that I think it was this past week we were asked through this office to come and to contribute. When I was appointed to the Board of Health a year ago, February, youth outreach had already been moved with an advisory board, and the logistics and billing are managed by Nancy, but they don't come to present to us since my tenure. So I can speak on my own, and the board this advisory board did come to the Board of Health a few months ago, before town meeting, and we're talking about the plans through the Board of Health. So what I'll say is, from what I got that night at that public meeting, that the existing members were very supportive of
The existing
Medfield-
members of the Board of Health?
Yep, of Medfield Youth Outreach. There are minutes, I think, that reflect that. There were questions about personnel and job descriptions that Nancy Bonatti is the one who manages.
Mhm.
I don't know about those things, and some of those questions were addressed. I know the value of this department from a personal standpoint, and living here for 27 years, working in prevention and working responsively with Riverside to support Medfield residents with mental health crisis and suicide. So
Okay.
that was a
I get it.
long answer to say personally, yes. When the advisory board came, and Kathy Thompson may want to speak, it was clear that the Board of Health all seemed to be very supportive of youth outreach. But personally, they haven't been at our meeting since I've been appointed, and it wasn't a vote or anything like
Okay,
that.
so they haven't endorsed it. My next question, I got it. And this might be
We
a
weren't
question for the,
asked to endorse.
well, I'll get to why I'm asking the question.
Sure.
You said when you joined the Board of Health,
I was appointed.
the advisory, yes, correct.
Yep.
The advisory group, what had been moved that you said before you got there?
So this is the history that I was hoping the other two Board of Health members, Christine may be able to speak to it, because I was appointed a year ago, February, and there was an advisory board appointed for youth outreach, and they then reported to the advisory board, no longer to the Board of Health.
So
Can
that,
you
this
expand
is
on
the two, I can cut through some of this. That advisory board is the advisory board that was created in 2016?
December of 2016.
Okay, so that's, the
Yes.
reason I'm going there is my first concern, and first off, thank you. You're holding this office together in the absence of a director. You pulled
Trying.
this together, you pulled that together. So my questions are not firing at you.
That's okay.
This has to do with the town
Right.
and how we make decisions and how we do things. My first set of questions concerns governance.
Exactly, yep.
And so my first question, and this is actually going to be a question for the two of you as well. The advisory board, to the best of my knowledge, was appointed in December of 2016 by the Board of Selectmen. All of the boards and the committees that we appoint, we reappoint on an annual basis. So I have never seen an appointment of the advisory board since I've been on the Board of Selectmen, because I came in March of 2017. The members of boards and committees are also approved or appointed, as you know, by the Board of Selectmen. And so there was a set of people who were appointed at the time the advisory board was created. And then there's a bunch of other people who are on the board who have never come before the Board of Selectmen, we weren't involved at all. Before I sit there and make a big deal about that, I actually am going to throw a question out to the two of you and to Mark. Is this because youth outreach is a department of the Board of Health, does an advisory board for the youth outreach somehow not fall under the umbrella of all the boards and committees that we would normally do an annual review on? Is this a different animal? And basically, they can do what they want, they can put people on when they want. We really don't need to change or review the charter, if you will, on an annual basis.
No, they should have been reappointed in 2017 and reappointed in 28.
Okay, so-
And I inadvertently left them off the list of appointments in 2017.
So this is not a shot at you, it's not a shot at all of you. It's that one of the things we need to get straight is our own governance around how this works.
Mhm.
So that's a broad comment that before we figure out what to do, we got to get our act together.
Yeah, and actually, Christine had sent me, and which I then passed on to our board, that annual review document, and so that's something, there's some documents that I included in your packet in terms of a draft charter, but that's something that we're working on together as a board, and I will get to you by June 30th.
Let me jump to that for a minute, again, with the next question, and again, it's governance. You sent a draft charter for the advisory board,
Yes.
not for youth outreach.
Yes.
Correct.
That's the correct way for it to do it. So this really is going to be the draft charter for the advisory board. Then my next question around governance, at what point, since 1979, did the town make the decision that it would get into clinical services as opposed to non-clinical?
So based on, again, the annual town report from 1979, and I think I included a quote from there, I can go back.
Yeah, the quote doesn't say clinical, it does say short-term counseling. I'm drawing a real clear distinction between clinical counseling that requires the kind of licensing and introduces the kind of liability and introduces the kind of HIPAA issues from non-clinical counseling, which I absolutely, from everything I can tell, you're doing a great job of, and there's a need for it, and it's wonderful. My real concern is clinical versus non-clinical services.
So I think, again, in terms of the language used in the mental health field, I think it's developed since 1979 to use the word clinical. I think that's a word that's used ubiquitously now. Back in 1979, I'm not sure if that was a word that was so widely used. Just reviewing, I mean, I literally have boxes of documents paper documents I was sifting through from the 80s, and just in reviewing those documents, it appears that there was clinical counseling that was being done. Documentation of client notes, numbers, mental health issues that were identified per client. And so using that historical documentation, it seems that it has been clinical in nature since the beginning. Again, that's the documents I've been exposed to, but there might be other documentation that I'm not aware of.
I certainly have a lot of learning I can do here, but I would be willing to bet that in the 1980s, the state of the art for mental health didn't call for much clinical services at all. If anything, we had gaps. There was nothing there. So I don't believe the fact that you would have had notes there says they were providing counseling services, but I would at least question either whether those kinds of clinical services were so trivial that they weren't regulated. I mean, now we're talking about needing to upgrade a position to support clinical services.
Right.
We obviously didn't have that kind of a requirement. If there was clinical services provided in the 80s, apparently the regulation of those clinical services was not something that called for that kind of oversight. So
Perhaps.
I'm working my way through the dark here, so
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough to challenge you for sure. But what I see is there's a real important question for me around when we made a decision to provide clinical services here in town.
Sure.
So I guess I would say that from reading that description that's on the screen now, I think that, to me, that's clinical counseling.
I don't see clinical counseling there at all. Short-term
well, I
counseling,
do.
Where?
Well, the
Short-term
fact that there's
counseling?
counseling, short-term
Well,
counseling,
there's clinical and
family
non-counseling.
counseling.
You can read the licensing requirements, and there's a distinction between clinical and non-clinical counseling.
Read the what, the licensing?
Yeah, the stuff that Chelsea
Yeah,
provided.
and
the
that's-
different-
that's current
there's
licensure
distinction between the
requirements.
licensing requirements.
I can say that again, Dawn Alcott was in her role as director of Medfield Youth Outreach for almost 20 years, 19 and a half. And during the almost 2 decades of time, the job description she applied for was to provide clinical counseling, and licensure was required as stated in the job description that she applied for at the time. So I can speak at least for the past 20 years that that's been an expectation of the department, and that's the services that have been provided.
I can remember a conversation with Dawn when she came to present to the selectmen, when the selectmen were Paul Ruda, Ann Thompson, and me. And I remember talking to Dawn afterwards and her talking about the fact that the youth outreach was doing clinical counseling, basically. So
I've been here, then I'll put it a different way. I've been here for 2 years. That rings an alarm bell for me. So whatever happened in the past, so far I don't see the clear distinction. There's several things that I'm concerned about here, and it's not that under no circumstances should we do clinical counseling, but to me that is a distinct side of the river that we're on when we do that, as opposed to a referral service with people who are qualified social workers who farm, people can come to youth outreach, can talk to someone who understands broad spectrum what their needs are. And it actually sounds like that's most of what you're doing.
That's a portion of what we do, definitely.
So Gus, I'm being obtuse now, and I'm not understanding your distinction between clinical counseling and counseling. So maybe if you could explain to me what you're thinking of as the differences.
So here it talks about crisis intervention, short-term counseling. If someone has, their house burns down, and they're homeless, they need insurance, they need different kinds of aid, they need food aid, they are dealing with some short-term stresses.
Exactly,
I
definitely.
can picture short-term counseling to help someone from a qualified social worker to help people get through that short-term period until, if they need longer-term support, they can be referred to that longer-term support.
Right, and we've actually had instances of residents coming to our office within the past few years seeking needs-based assistance, and actually a referral to Riverside Emergency Services was made. And the only reason that, because there was a licensed clinical social worker speaking with that resident, they were able to pick up on those mental health cues that this person is having a mental health crisis and is suicidal. And without revealing too much information that would disclose anything HIPAA protected, this has happened multiple times over the years. And I think that, with a licensed mental health professional located in our office providing a range of services, they're uniquely poised to be able to recognize residents who are in crisis, not just in terms of their, physical house burning down or something like that, but also a mental health crisis where someone might be suicidal. And we're able to recognize those signs, ask the right questions, and get them to the services they need. And that saves lives.
Okay. You just said the magic words. Get them to the services they need. So here's where I'm getting confused. That, I think, is absolutely something we should do. I'm not challenging. I'll call that a triage role, because someone comes in and you figure out how to help them. Where I get confused is when we're having discussions about people who need mental health services.
Sure.
And don't just get referred to mental health services. But in fact, it seems to me what we're doing is some number of those clients we're retaining in a town-sponsored mental health clinic to provide services to people. Who pays for that?
Tax dollars pay for that.
That's my point exactly. tax dollars. So why is it that they're coming here? And one point you made is, it's too hard for them to get transportation as an issue. And my point is, I think as a town, we need to decide, is that really a service that we want taxpayers to pay for? Or do taxpayers want to pay for? I'm standing up for somebody here. If taxpayers say, no, we want to pay this money, then I pull all that in. If some of those people can't afford private insurance and they're on Mass Health, then my question is, why aren't they getting services through Mass Health? And if the answer is, well, because private practices won't provide that, then I'm saying, why are we providing that for free when the people who run these clinics won't touch it with a 10-foot pole, but we won't actually go after even the Mass Health reimbursement? We would much prefer to just put it on the taxpayer's back. And if the short answer is, well, we don't have enough volume to do it, and that's the answer for every town, then it seems to me that just begs for a regional clinic supported by the towns that's structured to be the safety net. I don't know why there's a safety net called Mass Health, and we're choosing not to use that safety net, or we're not in a position to be able to do it because the volume's not there. And our answer is, so we just think the town should provide a health service at town taxpayer expense. I need to know when we had that discussion and when we made that decision.
Well,
And it may be right now, but if that decision was had and we made that decision.
Well, I think we made the decision.
Well, it's obviously we made the decision.
79.
I mean,
No,
it's-
Pete, I totally reject that.
I know you
How
reject
is
it, but
this?
I think you're
Okay.
wrong.
Okay.
Right, but I mean, would
Okay.
you accept the fact, Gus, that this is in fact something that we have done at some point between 1979 and 2019?
Apparently, but I'm asking,
Right.
but
so I
how
don't
did
know why
that?
pinpointing the date.
Well, no,
is
no,
germane
well,
to
the
the
issue,
discussion.
so I started with governance. I'm asking the question, how did we review what was going on in youth outreach and make the conscious decision to do something, to do or not do something? And I think the answer is we never did. And so now we're having a discussion about upgrading staff, probably, I guess, expanding the services with no intention of, well, I won't say this yet. If we are gonna do that, one of the questions I have is so what's the business model to pay for it? Right now, I think the business model is, we just throw it on the taxpayer. That's a big piece of where I'm coming from here. You had a hand up.
Well, this is the government, Gus. It's typically who pays for the government,
Okay.
for good or for
Yes.
ill.
Yep.
I'm Kathy Thompson. I'm the school nurse leader in town. I'm a nurse practitioner, have been in my role for 22 years. So during those 22 years, we refer many clients, and it's all for clinical counseling. So I know it's been around for at least 22 years
And
of
my-
that time.
Well,
And I think we need to clarify about, we're not really looking to upgrade the position. We're looking for the same position, but the job description wasn't correct before. It had listed a bachelor's degree, and Chelsea can speak to this more than I, but also you had to have a clinical license, which you have to have a master's degree for. So we just asked for that to be changed to a master's degree, not because you can't have a bachelor's
is that
degree.
accurate?
Basically, we were paying at a bachelor's level, but the position required the person to have a master's to be able to do the counseling.
So, which at least makes, I'm asking a question here. I'm not staking out a position. I'm looking at something that's changed. It's increased the cost of what we're doing. Now, I think what I'm hearing you say is, well, if you hire somebody with a higher degree of qualifications, I'm
Well-
pretty sure it's gonna increase the cost. But leave that aside.
No, that we've had somebody in that position. She just was underpaid.
So are we gonna find somebody else in the position who is also gonna be happy to be underpaid?
No, we were looking to.
So we're increasing the cost. So we are increasing the cost of the position.
Yes,
Okay.
but we're not changing the position.
Well,
And we're
that's
not
important.
changing.
That's
We're
important.
not changing what the position is, the mission or any of the qualifications.
So
or-
there's that, other than, so the,
So we're not talking about not doing counseling, and all of a sudden we're doing more counseling.
so does that mean then we were actually operating out of
The
Out
job
of
description
compliance?
the job description wasn't correct before. You couldn't have had a bachelor's degree and fulfill the job description.
So we were operating out of compliance before?
We were just underpaying.
No,
No, the job
Either you
description-
need- either you
the job
have
description
degree
wasn't correct.
required or you don't. And if we have somebody, if
We-
what you're
we had
telling me,
people with-
Kathy,
we had
Kathy, if
people
what
with a
you're
degree.
telling me is we're replacing the past director We're upgrading the job description, the qualifications. We're not doing anything different operationally
Not
than what we've
upgrading.
done in the past.
Correct.
Then my question is, well, if we need to upgrade it to get somebody to be able to oversee it now, does that mean we were out of compliance?
No, if I
No,
can,
we
if
were
I
not
can
out
just
of
clarify,
compliance.
I think there's just some semantics. So when Dawn was hired, Dawn had her master's, correct?
Yes.
Whether or not the job description required a bachelor's or a master's, we just finished a reclassification 6 years ago, and that position was not identified as one that was to be increased. So I just want to make sure it's not clear that we don't think we were underpaying her for 20 years. 6 years ago, the job, came in marketable. Whether or not that's changed based on the market, we can discuss that with the personnel board. But what they're looking for is a change in the grading. Not based on whether or not it's a master's, but you're basing that solely on the salary of the other towns, correct? Okay, so that's what they're looking for.
Has
we're
this
not
gone
sure-
through the personnel board?
No, the Board of Selectmen wanted to meet with them first before it went to the Personnel Board because we were looking at the structure of the department and whether or not we were doing this efficiently.
Okay, I think I at least have a tentative understanding of that position. So it sounds like for sure it would cost us more, but from an operational standpoint, it doesn't really, we're not saying we're gonna do things that are radically different than what we've been doing in the past.
We're gonna stay the
Okay,
course of what we've been
that's helpful.
doing.
So now let me throw my bigger issues here. In the stuff that you put together, Don, the prime target, I'm sorry.
I'm both right
So
now.
it's,
so.
yeah, you are both. It's the prime target is 18-year-olds and their families.
In terms of clinical counseling, we see youth 0 to 18 and families. In terms of all of the other range of services we provide, that covers the full age spectrum of the community.
So where I'm going, there's another place in here that talks about services provided to 19 to 25-year-olds. There's another spot in here that talks about things like fuel assistance and other, that is available to the entire town.
Yes.
Pete, who mentioned or Carol, somebody mentioned the Council on Aging. We have the Shine resources. We have a veteran service
There's an
officer for
outreach
veterans. We have
worker there as
outreach
well.
work, we have outreach.
Susan Bernstein, I think,
And-
performs that for the town.
So one of my broad questions about youth outreach is, we have an entire town of people that have issues and need help.
Yes.
For a couple of segments of them, the seniors and the veterans and high school and below, we kind of have deliberately targeted maybe something with the 19 to 25-year-olds. The name of this is Medfield Youth Outreach. I wouldn't necessarily think the town residents who don't have kids would even know that youth outreach, if you're 50 years old and you have a problem that you need fuel assistance or you need some other support, you would go to the Medfield Youth Outreach Office. It's probably one of the last places I'd think of. Sure.
I
Sure.
can say, Michelle Manhill, I can say that we at the police department have been referring a number of people for a number of years.
Okay.
Didn't matter how old they were, if it was, again, fuel assistance, if it was mental health, just to go get resources. But at the police department, we
Okay.
have absolutely been handing out, whether it was their card or their flyer, we were
Okay,
providing that information.
So this is, now I'm talking to the advisory board. That makes me feel better. But from an advisory board standpoint, my question is, are we actually doing something where we've taken the true needs of the town into account? Is this really what our services should be, or should we be thinking more broadly about what the town's needs are and come up with a direction for this organization that actually addresses the full spectrum of the town? And that may, it's good that the police department's doing that. I sure as heck wouldn't have, if I haven't had any problems, but if I had something, you'd be the last folks that I'd think to go to at my age. Okay, yeah. Yeah, youth begins at 60. So that's one question I have. It's a strategic question. There's another question I have. We have resources at the schools that are focused on students. We have resources in youth outreach that are focused on students plus a little bit more. I think actually, again, Council on Aging and Veteran Service can take into account that. We have clergy, leaders, and other members of the community who do some of this. I would like to see a comprehensive picture of how that all fits together before we simply build, well, we're not building, I get it, but before we simply repeat and wash again, that we actually take a look at that.
Sure, and I think you're right that the nature of this work in human services is extremely collaborative, and we as a department are deeply ingrained in the fabric of this community. We have a lot of constant collaboration with the schools, with the police department, with the library, with Parks and Rec, with the Council on Aging, with Veteran Services.
So it should be
we-
easy to put that picture together.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a brief overview now if you'd like,
I'd
to kind
actu-
of paint a picture.
Well, I'd like to know that everybody is saying the same thing. I'd like to know, what I'm looking for is coherence. Coherence. Because if I just count resources, it's like there's a lot of resources in little pockets. I don't, not that I would, but I don't know how they all fit together to know whether what we're doing is efficient and logical and effective. I know in this case, the name of youth outreach wouldn't have automatically come to the top of mind for me. I can tell you in the last 2 years, we've had occasion to look for help, and we went immediately to clergy, and we got the help. We wound up going straight to Riverside.
Right.
Is where we went, and I was a little confused with one thing you wrote, because you talked about interface, referring people back to youth outreach, where I was thinking of interface as the one that was kind of like the interface to the rest of the world. So it just means I don't understand the scheme.
Sure, and I think you're right that there are so many different pockets of services in this community, and I agree that Medfield Youth Outreach is a little bit of a misnomer. I think that name has carried through over the decades, and back to a time when we did primarily serve youth back in the 70s. Now, I mean, I think we're more of a youth and family services department and looking at families and understanding that term in a broad sense. We, again, I've said this earlier, but we're kind of a hub. And so you're right that sometimes residents are like, where do I go? What do I need? Do I go here? Do I go here? I don't really fit. I'm not a veteran. I'm not old enough to go to the Council on Aging. Where do I go? Our department acts as that hub. People can walk in our door and say, these are my needs. And we, again, because of our collaboration, we're able to help them figure out where they should best go.
That's absolutely something I think we should continue to do. I'm not going after the function, but as I was reviewing this, even to hit closer to home, 18 years old and younger, well, you know what? Not all the people that have committed suicide in this town were 18 or younger.
Right.
And some were close. And so there's a targeting issue here. I'm really talking there about a broader strategic consideration of what the social needs of the town are. So if we're going to do this, let's do it in a coherent way in terms of having all the resources coordinated, and let's do it in a thoughtful way. We talk about, rather than simply saying, well, there's going to be more and more needs, and they kind of organically grow, and we try to keep up. Let's think about that in that broader way, and come up with some more thoughtful approach for helping all of the town, not just certain little segments that
And I appreciate you bringing that up. I think you're right on the money there, that mental health and suicide affects people across the lifespan. That's one of the reasons why the Medfield Coalition for Suicide Prevention arose 2 years ago. It's relatively new, but it's very active, and it touches and it has involvement from all sectors of the community. So there's clergy, there's youth, there's parents, there's schools, police. I mean, really, like many people in this room are on that coalition, and we are working again as a coalition, so we're unfunded. We're doing this on volunteer time, and we're working to prevent future suicides in this community, and not just for youth, for people of all ages.
I just wanted to add that I really appreciate what you're saying as far as identifying the needs across the lifespan and looking at like a SWOT analysis. What do we have? How does it all fit together? Rep. Garlick came to the first two suicide prevention coalition meetings, and she then provided the earmark of the funds. And that was something that we talked about, is having someone do a needs assessment across the lifespan. It's very difficult to get data for 18 and up. You have to work with hospitals, emergency department data, state data. So it's quite an undertaking. However, working with multiple towns, many towns are looking for the same exact thing, to be able to know that they're targeting. The one thing that is not disputed is how vital each of these departments are in Needham, Dedham, Westwood, many, because they are a hub. So perhaps it's the marketing and the perception that may have been not articulated. But as a mom who's lived here 27 years, I can validate what this group said when they came a couple of months ago to the Board of Health, as well as what I've seen as someone who worked in addictions counseling for NORCAP. So I would like to do both. And what I'm just concerned about and really want you to clarify, so because I'm just here to advocate for the work not to be lost and to have another person with Chelsea, are you saying that it would wait until this big needs assessment was finished and then move forward? Because that is concerning to me, and I know that there are now some resources that we could hire someone to do that, and it's been discussed with Denise, and it's so valuable. But I'm hoping, because I know the demand, that someone else can be hired to work with Chelsea.
So I'm speaking for, you're asking the question, I'll answer for myself, and then Pete and Mike. Kathy, your comments have partially settled me down a little bit about whether we're growing or not, so that's helpful. Doesn't take away the question about, are we actually thinking about this with a clear set of strategic eyes versus simply kind of doing more of what we've been doing. There's two things I think that I would personally like to see before committing, my intention wouldn't be that these are lengthy. One is, at this point, I would either like to know that the Board of Health has endorsed this, or I need to understand how the authority of the advisory group has been put in place by presumably us.
I don't think it actually has any authority.
Well, that's my point. So either we're saying as selectmen, yes, we do want the advisory group to be the oversight for Medfield Youth Outreach, in which case, I don't know whether the Board of Health is relevant to that or not. I take recommendations on that, but if the real decision or the endorsement is at the advisory group level, then I don't, just to have a lot of lines on a diagram doesn't mean a whole lot. So I would like to understand that piece of governance. And then the other thing, it sounds like it would be easy for you to put a picture together of the resources that we have here in town.
Sure.
About what the role of the schools staff is, what the, not that I think I don't want to over-integrate it, but it would be good to have the inventory of who it is at the Council on Aging that helps, who it is, the veterans, where Interface and Riverside and any other resources fit, how the clergy, how other community leaders fit, and what their role is in doing this. Because right now, it's for me, it's a little bit of a cloud of dust in terms of which way the arrows are going. And so if everyone's collaborating, it ought to be easy to paint that picture. And then we ought to be able to look at that and say, yeah, now we understand what resources we have addressing which problems for which people within which parameters. Right now, I'm lost on that.
So can I just address a couple of the things? Because at one point, I had the idea that it might make more sense to have greater integration, and you're talking about sort of integration. And when I talked to people about that, what I discovered was that it seems like there were certain silos. I mean, there's Sue Bernstein at the Council on Aging is the outreach worker, but she operates in the Council on Aging. And whether or not the Council on Aging and the Youth Outreach ever get together and do things together, or with the Veterans Service Agent or Shine or anybody else, everybody's in a separate department, and so the collaboration is really going to be based upon those personalities' ability to interact.
Exactly. I want that
So
fixed. I want that fixed.
Well,
You're absolutely right.
I was thinking about creating a human services department, and somehow integrating all of that, but certainly the Council on Aging doesn't want to give up Sue Bernstein and whatever else, so that, and I know at one point I was talking to Chief Meany about the fact that I was getting upset as a citizen about the fact that we were incarcerating people with mental health issues that really didn't belong in jail, and it wasn't going to be any good for them. And he told me that in fact he did tap into Riverside and have people from counselors from Riverside come on certain calls to try to keep those people out of the criminal justice system. So, I mean, for me, that was, I was very happy to hear about that. I literally came to think that the police and the fire are part of our human services system, because they are, in fact, dealing with the people who need the human services from our society. We don't have that many entities in town. I mean, the schools provide a lot of that human services now through the social emotional learning, I think they call it. But I mean, basically, it's a lot of counseling type services for the kids are they're just a microcosm of our world, and a substantial portion of our American society is depressed, has issues, and benefits from getting assistance from counseling.
So first, Pete, thanks for flipping that card over, because I didn't put it that bluntly. The answer for silos is not build a bigger silo. As far as I'm concerned, it isn't. I'm not shooting at anybody here. Let's understand this. You all, if there's anybody in town and in society that I think has to be driven by a degree of compassion and care about the people who need help, it's got to be you all, more so than me. And that's true, I would think, of the people who do that inside the schools, of the people who do that at the Council on Aging. The silos are only there because we put the silos there. And if somebody's worried about, gee, I'm going to lose my silo because if I work too much with you, then it's all going to get sucked into your silo.
So Gus, let me
It's a
share with you
problem.
the other thing that I learned very recently, which was about the clergy in town.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked whether or not the clergy had some sort of organization where they cooperate with each other, and I was informed that they used to, but they don't anymore. So I mean, I think there's a lost opportunity.
Yeah,
but,
that's
you
why
know,
I
I'm not one of the clergy in town, so I'm not working on that.
I would include that. I mean, like I said, in our case, that was when we needed help. We didn't think going to the town. We actually went to clergy. They have a role to play. If our society's gotten to the point where even the clergy has given up on playing that role, man. Next.
Kathy Thompson. I think it's a great idea to do a needs assessment. I think we absolutely need that done. We actually went, I went to a meeting in Needham just yesterday looking for funding to do something like that, because they've done that and they got funding from BI Needham, which they apparently Medfield does not come under. It's Dedham and Dover. And Needham and a fourth one, but they wouldn't give us funding. But that's and I think we can certainly come up with a diagram, but to do a true needs assessment, how would we do that?
So
I mean, I think we do need to do that, but
first off,
I'm not sure.
I'm not putting that up as a prerequisite to deal with this spot, okay?
Yep.
I'm saying I would like the diagram, and I would like it to be the diagram that everybody in town agrees, all the relevant players agree to. Now, I'm quoting what you wrote here that said we work really closely with the schools. That's probably one of the largest, and Michelle, you're sitting with one foot in both boats, so you could probably help this. So either we are working closely with everybody or we're not. I understand.
The schools work very closely with
And so the picture I'm looking for, if there's some places that said, yeah, there's this resource over here, and this is kind of what they do, and you can go ask, Roberta, and she'll agree with this picture, and it won't show a well-oiled machine. It'll just say, there's this circle over here that handles this subset, and this over here that's handled out of the Walpole Veteran Service Officer, but we haven't really done anything there. I kind of would like to see the clergy and how they connect in, but I'm not trying to force, I'm asking to see what it looks like. I'm asking for us to paint the picture, and where things are not connected, at least we're looking in the mirror and we're seeing where they're not connected. That's just the first step. That's all I want. The other piece of that was when we do that, we will have a picture of how much of this town's population's needs we actually are consciously addressing, and who is it that falls through the crack. Right now, it sounds like the adults that largely fall through the crack are adults that don't have kids that are 18, through youth outreach, are adults that don't have kids that are 18 years old or younger.
And I think that's.
We still refer, I mean, as I'm chair of the home committee in town, and I do refer
So,
single
so,
adults
but
through.
you see the,
I do.
I'm not
I'm just
looking
not
for a
sure.
Rembrandt here.
Yep.
I'm looking for an accurate
You know what
picture.
my concern is? That we've cut this department in half. We have, I mean, we certainly, there's a lot of vulnerable kids that are missing out right now because this position is down. We've tried to fill that in through the schools with helping out at the end of the year. There's a line of kids that aren't being serviced this summer because we just don't have anybody to service them. Chelsea can't see siblings, for an example. I have one family. That now to even wait even further, I'm not sure. I mean, Chelsea dropped what she was doing to put together all, you know, with the board, but to put together, you know, a lot of information for you, but she also has a job to do, and she's doing the job of two people. So I'm just not sure, I mean, we need a needs, you know, I'm just not sure who does that.
So the needs assessment is not gonna hold that up.
Okay,
This picture's gonna hold it up, but it should be an easy picture
yep.
to put together.
And
We
I'm
can
happy
put-
to do that. And if it would be helpful, I can give you a few examples of some ongoing collaborations that are happening right now with various town departments. Would that be useful to you to hear some stories
It would,
about?
the picture is more useful. Kathy, the comment you made, this is my ignorance, this is not a criticism. When you say you have a line of kids trying to get something,
Yep.
I'm not sure whether that something is what I would call referral services to get them where they need to go, or if it's clinical services.
It's both.
So
It's
if-
both. We can
if
do
the-
some
if
of
the
it through the
demand for
schools,
So
yeah.
if the demand for clinical services, because of the staffing, is unmet,
Right.
we're making them wait, or do we refer them out?
We don't do a wait list because that just wouldn't be ethical. But kids, I mean, I've seen kids over town, they haven't found anybody. So we use Interface. Unfortunately, all of the local providers, they aren't taking any more Mass Health kids. So Mass Health just reimburses so little that it's not worth it. I can't even, like a new kid moved to town, I can't get a pediatrician in town because they won't take Mass Health. They've taken their quota, they're done.
You guys talked to Cindy Garlick about this. I mean, do
Yeah.
you understand what I'm getting
Yeah,
at here?
it's Denise
So
Garlick,
You're
yep.
telling me there's a long list of people who can't get services.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
All of the professionals that run clinics say, we're not taking Mass Health.
Right.
And so the answer is coming back, well, then I guess Medfield just has to pick up a free healthcare service.
No, all towns do.
And I'll tell, it doesn't matter.
No,
I
I'm just
mean,
saying, we're not giving
my
away
my
anything.
point is the same for all. And let me tell you why I'm so fired up about it.
Yeah.
Because the state, right now in our budget, I'm watching seniors leave this town. So we're compassionate in one sense,
Yep.
and we're completely ruthless in another sense. If you look and you take a look at the current taxes for real estate, and you extrapolate out 10 or 20 years, paint me the picture that says that people who are retired are going to be able to stay here. And when you look at the problem we have, the problem is 10 years ago, taxpayers covered 70% of our budget. Now, 10 years later, it's 80%. All of that extra education funds, people are saying this needs to go over to these other towns that have needs. We're covering needs, and no one's giving us credit even for covering the needs.
Well, I mean.
So this isn't all just about you. This is about how do we manage to keep the town's taxes at a level where people in this, where Medfield stays Medfield, it doesn't become Wellesley or Weston or Hamilton.
I know.
Well, I mean,
That's why I'm fighting so
I
hard.
can, tell you that it's a very small budget. We're getting a great bang for our buck. She cleans her own bathroom. She empties her own trash. I mean, this is a very low-budget department.
So you're saying it won't be growing?
No, I did not say that. What I said was, I think you're getting a lot of service here. You mentioned the schools a couple times. We do a great job in the schools. We have a superintendent who thinks social emotional learning is so important. Unfortunately, our job is to really to educate kids. So when they see the guidance counselor, it's for a check-in. It's not true clinical counseling. So that's why we refer so much over. I know you had questions about, are we giving, are all these rich people in town, sort of like, would a rich person go to the, food pantry? That really, I do have a list of private doctors that I refer people to. I have a good sense of who doesn't have the resources, and then we refer them to, we're not referring everybody for free services here. I think we're very careful on who we refer, and for the most part, it is all our Mass Health kids, or again, the car thing. I know that sounds, I think you belittled that a little bit. I know two families, they walk, they work opposite days and nights, and literally, if they weren't seeing this kid, we would have lost this kid. You know, I mean, it's really vital, the services provided.
So let me
And,
give you an example, though, just as a counter.
Yep,
Because the short answer is, and that's why we think the taxpayers should pay for this. And you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
I'm saying
I
I'm
do.
not buying that.
yep,
Or at least I'm not buying it easily.
yep.
Several years ago, the Council on Aging came in and said, you know, there's people in town that need respite care. And we were able to get some grants, and we have 3 years of coverage for respite care. We put a respite care program in place, and Roberta at the time came to the warrant committee and said, in 3 years, when those grants are over, we'll be coming in for an addendum to our budget to cover the respite care program. And the warrant committee said, no, we're not gonna, you can have the respite care program, we'll make the town resources available, we'll provide that kind of support, we'll pay your electric bill and stuff like that, but if you want a respite care program, you have this 3 years worth of grant funding. By the end of that 3 years, you got to figure out a way to put that on a self-funding basis, because we didn't believe it was right to tax all taxpayers for a benefit that a relatively small number of taxpayers were going to take advantage of in an area that actually there were commercial options out there. It's just they were more expensive. And so in my mind here, I understand maybe it's because it's youth and because it's, well, I don't know, respite care can come close to this too, but I understand it's a slightly different qualitative situation, but it's not really a fundamentally different proposition of having taxpayers fund a benefit for a small number of residents. And so, in other words, if the source of taxes wasn't on the table, if you just couldn't do that, then what would you do? Would you close up shop? Or would you sit there and figure out some other way to fund it, either through a regionalized service or people pay something, but they don't, how, in the case of respite care, they're not paying commercial rates. They're paying enough for Roberta to be able to run a break-even operation for respite care. And I think if you talk to her now, she'll point to it with pride about how well-received it is, how successful it is, and how much good it's doing. But it was not yet another thing that we added onto the taxpayers' shoulders. So.
I don't think this is changing anything with the taxpayers, though. That we're asking just for a little more money to make the position marketable. That's all. We lost Dawn because she, jumped a couple towns and made $15,000 more money at an entry level there versus a high level here. That's really all we're looking for.
So the one thing the selectmen asked Christine to do when she took over was to take a look at, basically, I think we asked Christine, find some ways we can structure the town in a more efficient way to get the job done
Yeah.
and take some pressure off on taxes.
Right.
The request, and I'm doing all the talking here, so there's 2 other votes here at this table.
Yep.
The thing I'm asking for would be that picture of how these things all fit together. If Pete is right, and there's a silo mentality, then in the longer run, personally, I want to see those silos coming down, and I don't think the answer is build a bigger silo that everybody's in. I think they come
Right.
down and we learn how to collaborate across different groups,
Yep.
but we also make sure we're covering everybody.
So after watching the youth outreach for a number of years and other people in town, I've concluded in my own mind that the 2 most politically savvy people in town were Gene Minio and Don Alcott, watching how they succeeded in getting things done. And I think Dawn was very good at collaborating with people. Not everybody collaborated back with her. I mean, you can't make people do things always. We're really talking about a real societal problems here. I mean, 42% of the state budget is mass health and healthcare, and I wouldn't want to be in any of those nursing homes as a mass health patient because I don't think you're getting the care. I'm doing the wrongful death cases for those patients that are getting killed by those services.
Or would you have problems with the town taking money from Mass Health to reimburse for health care services we provide?
That doesn't bother me, but I'm not surprised to hear Chelsea say that it's uneconomic. I've heard physicians say that it's uneconomic to take Mass Health, and Kathy was saying the same thing, basically. So it's.
So I'm gonna, I agree with Gus with many of your sentiments. I think this is, as a specific example, nobody's moving out of town because of the taxes levied to pay for the youth outreach department. And so,
No,
I
it's
mean,
just
which
overall
are
growth in
probably
taxes,
a
right.
third of the cost of what we spend to teach Mandarin to second graders. because of our former superintendent's fixation with China. So, which is fine, it's wonderful, people like it, but when you want to look at what's really costing money, this isn't one of them. I think, I agree with you on the silo issue, and I agree with you on having an overall picture here, and I do think it's a case of, we have programs that have been rolled out through the state that need to be administered through someone with some sort of social work background, and the youth outreach had someone with a social work background and therefore became responsible for fuel assistance. So I don't think you're going to find any strategic judgment for the way this is put together, other than the fact is, here's something we want to do, this is somebody who has the professional skills. I would say with respect to the salary of this position, I would want it to go through the personnel board and through the classification process.
Of course.
One thing we've tried to stop are sort of the special pleading from different departments about getting around the systems we have for this stuff, and so.
No, we wanted to go to the.
Yeah, so I think that's.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
that's
no,
got it,
we,
but this is a structural question for the department. I mean, I am sympathetic to a lot of what you say. I'm not prepared to say as a result of that, we should do away with youth outreach tonight, or do away with it before
that
hiring.
wasn't on
Well,
the table.
no, but, well, it is though. I mean, I think that's the logical thing if we're gonna say we're gonna fundamentally restructure the department, is we just get rid of it. I don't think we should do that. So I think we ought to move ahead with replacing the director, and then put a pin in this overall issue of how we're delivering social services. Are we delivering it in the most efficient way possible? And as part of this review, do we need to look at what the name of the youth outreach department is? Do we need to look at how the different people in the towns who are doing these things, what they're doing? And I don't think, I mean, I didn't see Chief Carrico jump up with excitement at the prospect of taking over medical billing for the youth outreach department. It's probably not a similar exercise to what he does. But again, figuring that out, but I think that's something that frankly, we would benefit from having a director in place and both people in the department to do some of that work to address the administrative concerns you've raised.
So there's 4 things that need to be done. The first one that you just talked about, which is that broad needs assessment for the 3rd time, that's on the other side of whatever staffing. So that's not on this side. The picture, if going to the personnel board is required, then the timing to put that picture together, I think, runs concurrent with that. So I don't see any reason why putting that picture together of how these things all fit together is going to stretch out the normal thing you have to do to go to the personnel board. And I assume you're saying that happens first before we approve to hire, before we hire,
Or
approve
increase the
to do
salary or
anything.
whatever.
The other piece is, I think it's on us, is right now it's not clear to me who endorses, put it bluntly, Chelsea, you're here saying you want to replace somebody. Nobody here in the room has the authority to say yay, nay, personnel board, but here in the room that's working with Medfield Youth Outreach has approved, rejected, endorsed, modified that decision. And this is on us. This is a governance issue around, I guess, let's take a good hard look at what the advisory board, what its charter is, what its membership is, and I think that's on us, which is something we're tackling here in the next month as well. So I don't see that delaying anything.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm not suggesting any of it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
just
guess I
think
would
we're
This
just,
is called coming to violent agreement.
I think we're toward, I think my suggestions were toward the end of the useful discussion we can have about this tonight.
Oh, yeah.
And they ought to move ahead to do the stuff they need to do, to check the boxes they need to check, to move ahead and replace this.
That's right.
And
So to clarify, as far as the Board of Health, and I think Nancy's here, did you say you need to clarify with Christine and the board and the advisory board who needs to authorize this job description?
It's going to be me working with the personnel board.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay,
Ca-
so
Carol-
it's not,
It hasn't changed in the 100 times we've talked about it since April.
so it's not, you're not looking for the Board of Health? Okay, I just want to clarify whatever I can.
So the,
just where
yeah,
the bills get paid
the
from.
question I have is a governance question around who's actually overseeing youth outreach and what do they do?
I think ultimately it's us. And the
Well,
town administrator.
I think that's not a good idea.
Chelsea currently is a department head as
Yep.
the interim director, so she reports to me similar to all the other department heads do, and obviously in turn
Okay.
report to you. You appoint the advisory group, and the advisory group reports to you as well.
And the purpose of I don't want to stretch this out. So there's a charter for the advisory group. that charter either does or doesn't include endorsing something like this request from Chelsea to replace it. Now, one answer is no, Chelsea reports to you, and you're the one who basically says, yeah, I think it's time to do it, or I don't. I'm okay with that, too. But I think the way it felt like we were going in this conversation was the advisory board was,
We just advise.
okay,
Advise and make recommendations. I
Yes.
believe.
Yes.
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And
So they're advising to all of us.
okay, and then effectively, what does the Board of Health do in
Well,
that
that's
scheme?
another good question, right? Because I
think
do
we're still
wonder
trying to answer
yeah.
that,
Okay.
figure that out.
whether
Okay.
that
Yeah.
still needs to be an oversight body or not.
That's,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
I think at this point, we may be able to separate those two. I think, and
Okay.
obviously, I've been here a long time, but not in 1979. So I can't speak to why the Board of Health was chosen to put youth outreach under, other than it might have been the easiest place to
Right.
have somebody
Yeah, we
pay
can-
the bills and manage that. Chelsea can do that on her own. I don't think she needs the oversight for that, so we may be able to separate that out from the Board of Health
okay,
at this point.
all right. Like I said, I'm just looking for coherence. Okay,
I think that's
All right.
great.
Chelsea, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you so
all.
much for your time.
Thanks for coming.
Is Pete gonna let you come to his meeting tomorrow?
I thought you were invited, but maybe if you're not, then I beg your pardon.
Actually, might need to stick around for the next item on the agenda.
Let's see, next item on the agenda
Yeah, it is her, yeah.
is Chelsea on the Drug-Free Communities Grant.
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm here, okay. I'm back. So I'm here representing the Medfield Cares About Prevention Substance Misuse Coalition. As you know, we're in the process of applying for the Drug-Free Communities Grant. That grant is due July 8th. In the interest of, which is a Monday, the day before your next board meeting. So in the interest of both the requirements of the grant, it's a federal grant, and in the interest of the scheduling and where your next Board of Selectmen meeting falls, we're requesting that you sign a letter granting Christine Trailweiler the authority to sign as a representative of the town. We have hired a very experienced and very well-qualified consultant to write this grant for us, and in consulting with her, she's spoken to many other towns who currently have DFC funding and who do this in the same way. They give the Board of Selectmen gives the town administrator the authority to sign on their behalf. And in fact, I think grant requirements dictate that a town employee needs to be the signatory and not an elected official. And so that's kind of the content of the letter that we're asking you to sign today to allow us to finish the process of applying for that grant.
So, works for you?
Works for me. I actually met with Chelsea and
Amanda Decker, yes.
to talk about that, and we went through the grant requirements for that, so it's not a problem. I believe Michael signed the first time.
He did, yes, yeah.
So we went through a similar process then.
Got a motion?
I move that we authorize the chair, authorize the town administrator to sign the Drug-Free Communities Grant application.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Did we, just one more second, did we talk about the timing of the grant submittal so that they can review it before it's submitted?
Yes, thank you. So the grant itself is due July 8th. We are attempting to submit it early in the interest of the July 4th holiday and understanding that people are out of town and to factor in any issues that may arise. I understand that as a Board of Selectmen, you'd like to review that grant before it's submitted. So if it's an appropriate format, we can email a copy of that grant to you prior to submitting on July 1st, if that is an okay format to accept it in.
So here's the issue. We just voted to authorize Christine to sign the document. If we get the draft before our next meeting and we review the draft, Mark, you need to listen to this because I'm trying to keep
I'm
on the right,
listening.
I'm trying to keep on the right side of the open meeting laws. If we get the draft and we're happy with what the draft says, and none of the three of us have any heartburn about the draft, then we will remain silent about saying that we need to add an agenda item on our meeting of the 9th to review the draft.
Well, the problem is the deadline is before the meeting.
Exactly, exactly. But the option is, well, we've got two options. We could either schedule another meeting so we can review this draft whenever it's ready over the 4th of July weekend. Or we can basically say, no, we're not going to approve it until the 9th, which is a day too late.
No, we can't do that,
So we
and there's so
can't
much
do
work
that.
that's gone into this, it has to go in.
So the only reason that that would happen is if one of the three of us reads that proposal, has major heartburn with it, and says, stop the presses, put that on the agenda.
So here's what
Okay.
I would say, for me.
Mhm.
Okay, I don't need to review the grant before it goes in. And am comfortable with Christine, if she's gonna sign it, if she is comfortable with the grant application. If she's not comfortable with the grant application, then we can have a meeting before this is gonna go in and have the meeting whenever that is.
You are going to read it before you sign it, right?
In my experience, once you submit a grant application, if you were to be awarded the grant, there would then be the binding stuff that would concern
So you
you
could
at
still
that time.
have it. Okay. All the more reason then, so my point, so that was the back, so Pete, you're okay with that
I'm
as well?
happy to have Christine read it for me, yes.
Okay. So that was the backwards way. That was the backwards way of me saying, I don't think we need to review a draft before the 8th, because for all practical matters, we're not going to do anything with it. And if something is so outrageous that Christine misses it and we have heartburn, we can always stop it before the grant money actually comes in.
Yes, there are many checks and balances in this process, so.
Okay.
Especially since her review is coming up shortly after that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Don't forget, your review comes right after mine.
Well, that's what I thought he meant at first. All right, thank you.
All right. The wheels of democracy grind slow yet exceedingly fine. All right.
No time left.
Chelsea did such a nice job. I considered having her present my stuff too. So, I'm here for a number of agendas tonight. I'll try and get the most pressing and most significant one out of the way. As you're aware, Deputy Wilhelmi has opted to retire to spend more time with his family and grandchildren and new grandchildren who are on the way. I wanted to thank him first and foremost for his professionalism and his assistance in helping me to transition into the department and get on solid footing. He did that at great sacrifice to himself. This leaves a vacancy within the department in the deputy chief's position. I think this is a vital role as it allows me to work on management and executive functions and programming and have another individual work on the operational level. After spending the last 6 weeks speaking to the sergeants who are within the department, I felt as though there was one individual who really represented the same type of community policing philosophy and compassionate policing philosophy that I share, as well as he is highly respected and well received within the department by the men and women. That being said, I think he possesses the requisite skills to learn a new set of management skills and start to see how managing police agencies actually works, and I think he'll settle into that role. For those reasons, I am respectfully requesting that the Board of Selectmen appoint Sergeant Lars Anderson to fill that position of Deputy Chief.
I think it's a great recommendation, and I have tremendous respect for Sergeant Anderson. I think he'll be great.
I think he'll be a rock star.
I heard that before.
Mm.
Okay.
I'm happy to move to appoint Sergeant Lars Anderson as Deputy Chief of the Police Department.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Assume we'll have a ceremony at a later date for
Yes, sir.
all that. Great.
Yes, thank you. The next order of business, given some anticipated shortages between retirements and some other anticipated shortages, I would like to respectfully request that the board approve my going outside through NeoGov to seek, within NeoGov, but outside of civil service lists right now to seek lateral transfers to the department. This would allow us to get seasoned officers who have already been through the academy and have some real-life experience come into our agency, bringing that experience in. We currently have a force that has a slightly older group of people and a younger group of people, but nothing kind of right in the middle, and I think that would be my target audience and would allow us to rapidly backfill. To see if we can get any interest in that.
Questions?
Is there a particular reason we haven't done this in the past, or is this authorization required every time?
It is required that I ask to go outside for laterals.
I think we have-
Civil service, I think in the past we've had the luxury of being able to wait a little bit, but in order for me to go off civil service, I do have to go through the process. The individual then has to get a background check, pass certain tests, complete the police academy, and then go through field training. So we're looking at about a year turnaround, and I think that's just too significant a time for us to wait when we have an opportunity to get boots on the ground quickly.
I think that we have gone for lateral transfers in the past as well, is my recollection, but I don't keep real close tabs on it.
If we did, it was a significant amount of time.
Okay. Yeah, sounds fine to me.
Fine with me, too.
Good with me.
Thank you.
Motion?
I would move to authorize the chief to seek lateral transfers to the police department.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Thank you. The next order of business regards civil service and my authorization to access that account so that I can put information like lateral transfers out, call for the civil service list, and participate in the hiring function. It just requires that the appointing authority designate me as a user to access that site, and I respectfully request your permission to do so.
Good.
I don't want to go on there.
Good.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Okay. Next?
Next order of business is that I'm respectfully requesting that the appointing authority appoint 2 specials to help us with traffic details. The first one would be Sergeant Ray Burton, who recently retired from the police department. I would just say he retired with honorable service, having done his career entirely with us. He would be eligible for road details, et cetera.
And the other one's Kaylee Lutz?
The other one is Kaylee Lutz. She is currently a resident of Millis. She does have her bachelor's degree in science from 2017 from Mount Ida College. She is currently working as an armed campus police officer at Regis College. We interviewed her. She seems like a very bright young lady who eventually will continue into career in law enforcement. We would look to use her based on her certifications to have her as a special that would be road capable.
Okay. And just how many years' experience does she have as?
She's only been out of college since 2017. She's had
2
two
years.
jobs at work, have both worked in a law enforcement field.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Yep. Aye. Okay.
Thank you. And the last order of business is that we have 3 officers within the department who notified me upon my hiring that prior to my arrival, they had applied for police departments outside of Medfield and are seeking transfers. The first officer I'll speak of is Officer Joe Brienzi. He has been with our department for a little over 3 years, 3.5 years. He has served as the union president and is sitting on a promotional list. However, he believes that the Needham Police Department will offer him greater opportunities and work better for his advancement in his career, and he respectfully requests that you authorize the transfer from him from Medfield to Needham.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
The second transfer I'll bring to your attention is that of Patrick Kelleher. Likewise, he has just over 3 years within the Department of Honorable Service. We did send him to an accident reconstructionist school, so I will have to backfill that as it's a necessary component in law enforcement. He is also requesting to go to Needham Police, both for opportunity and advancement, as well as his personal situation is that he's looking to relocate closer to Quincy for family reasons.
So moved.
Let me, before we, the first, Joe Brienzi, I think I understand the move. The other 2 officers, I would personally like to hear their reason. Maybe that's a good enough reason in the case of Patrick Kelleher, but I actually would like to hear directly why they're doing this. And I'm coming from an obvious point here. You've been in your position less than 2 months. We have 3 officers who are walking out of the police department, and I'd like to hear directly from at least the 2 why that's happening, and it has as much to do, Michelle, you can, you all, the police, no, well, I'm saying you're gonna be talking to them, so I'm talking to you. What I saw in the police officers that showed up during the search for the police chief, I walked away with a much deeper respect for the police officer across the board. This is probably my night for having unqualified opinions about all kinds of things that lead to long discussions, but I hope this won't be a long discussion. But I honestly think there's a tremendous career opportunity for the police here in Medfield. I know Patrick Kelleher because he graduated with my son, so that's the connection, and I've actually seen him in action once. I don't know Michael Saulnier that well. And I'm not saying that, oh, no, you can't go, but I would actually like to hear them, if it's feasible and possible, and you don't think it's a really bad idea that I should just pull in all my horns, I'd really like to just hear them either talk to us as a board, or I'm okay if you all want them just to talk to me. I just want to hear them tell me why, because I think they're turning the back on a good opportunity. So if anybody thinks that's a really dumb idea and I shouldn't do it, tell me. Go ahead.
I would suggest that you go and talk to them individually rather than having them come to a selectmen's meeting.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Is that okay, Mark?
Yeah, this essentially is just a ministerial approval, so
Yeah.
if you wanna, as Pete said, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Well, we don't have to say yes, though, right, do we?
We don't have to, but I'm not,
I mean, Mark said it's a ministerial approval, but I mean,
Well, I
if
think the
that means.
reasoning would have to be fairly compelling.
If an officer wants to leave, I would be hard pressed to try to force them to stay.
I mean, perhaps hypothetically, if you just spent a whole lot of money putting somebody through specialized training, whatever, like the academy or something like that, and then that might be a situation, but generally speaking.
I think that's part of the factor here, but that's.
So I can certainly speak to that end. Both Officer Banzi and Kelleher have completed 3 years. Based on our contractual language, they would have paid back their academy time and already been reimbursed for that. The only catch in this with Patrolman Kelleher is that we had sent him to an accident reconstructionist school. I'm sure that was an appealing thing for Needham Police. I've had a number of conversations with him, and he does have ties to the town, and I think there is some loyalty that's here. This boiled down to somewhat of a financial decision, although we discussed his relocating would probably absorb those finances pretty quickly. It's just that he's due to get married, and that his current fiance works in Quincy, and that the commute for her has been somewhat extreme, and that he's requesting to make that commute a little more reasonable.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps you in your.
So
Here's what I'll say. I mean, I agree with Pete that if someone wants to leave, generally speaking, we should let them leave. I mean, out of respect for you, if you want to hear from them before you vote on this, I'm happy to defer voting on that. So if you want to hear that before we do vote, I mean, I suppose if the goal is, this is a question, if your goal is to talk them out of it, if you're successful in that, I suppose they don't have to take the jobs, and we're just authorizing the transfer. I mean, conceivably, by authorizing this, it doesn't mean they're actually gone yet, does it? They have to get hired and go through whatever process there is in Needham?
They have been through the entire background process, and a formal job offer has been made at this point and
Okay.
signed off on by their appointing authority, as well as the officers involved. You are the final step in the process. They have target dates of, I believe both Patrick and Joe have target dates of July 8th, as listed on their transfers.
Yeah. So as I said, I'd be happy to vote yes on this, but if you want to talk to them before you vote, out of deference to you, I
Well,
would defer it. The only
let's
problem
get-
is that our next meeting is after their target date, and, if they're going to be moving on, they should get moved on.
May I ask a question? Just observing, they're young officers. Is the salary in Medfield the same as Needham, Walpole, Dedham? I'm just observing, and because I know with young people, and I don't know the answer to that. Is that despite
It's
you know,
higher in
the-
Needham. It's higher in Needham.
Foxborough, so I'm going to disagree with Shelley on this. I looked at the numbers in Foxborough. So Foxborough is not actually any meaningful step increase given the final officer. Needham does present a significant pay increase, as well as it's a larger department, some more advancement opportunities. That one I think maybe makes a little more sense to me. It's kind of like moving up to a bigger department or a little bit better paid. And I think those were some of the spurring reasons. The final applicant or the final transfer request is a little bit different than that in all factors in terms of his tenure with the department, the academy time, et cetera. So.
So my purpose is not to try to talk anybody out of anything. It was sincerely to basically ask them to, not to talk anybody out of anything they want to do. It was to sincerely ask them to consider the career opportunity that I think they have here. We're not going to be meeting before the 9th.
No, because the grant application's gonna be totally fine.
And frankly, you would have to be very careful how you talked about career opportunities too, because you're constrained by civil service, so.
All right.
I have done a cost analysis on what it would take for us to lose the 3 requests. It would currently put us at backfilling 8 shifts per week. If we were to lose all 3, the cost to do that is between $3,200 and $3,400 a week. Based upon what we pay out in salaries, that's a nominal loss for us. That's obviously not including our normal vacation and sick. In terms of overloading our current workforce, I plan on doing a somewhat reduced staffing level through the summer to help accommodate this, and because I think our population numbers drop in the summer with people summering elsewhere, and I can absorb that for that period of time, which is why I'm asking for the laterals to try and get some backfill in. But that's at least the cost analysis on it.
Been feisty all night long, Christine. What do you think? Let this one go? All right. Okay.
But good luck to Chief Carrico next.
All
I
right.
still have to talk about police cars and all that
I
other
would
stuff.
So
move
let's do
to
Patrick Kelleher
allow, well, I guess we already have a motion, I guess, on Mr. Kelleher, I
Yeah,
think.
okay, he moved on Patrick.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The
I would
final
move-
candidate, thank you. The final candidate is Officer Michael Saulnier. He's been with the police department for approximately 1.5 years. At this point in time, he is requesting to leave. Sorry to correct you, Shelley, but it is not really a financial windfall for him to do so. He has purchased a home in the department area that he lives in, and thinks that he will have some greater opportunities to spend time at home, less commute time. I did talk to him about opportunities here. At 1.5 years, we've made an investment in his academy, which, you know, losing somebody this quick on certainly is a bit of a hit to us to have made all of that front-end investment and not gotten more than 1.5 years out of service. I will say this, I support his decision for the simple fact that, having spoken to him, I think he's a very emotional person, a very family-oriented person, and those are the reasons that he's asking to make this decision. That's the compassionate side of me. The management side of me is a little less enthusiastic about this.
So we don't want to be in the business of bringing in brand-new police recruits, paying for their training so that other towns nearby can poach them. Appreciate the emotional side of this. However, it's hard for me to picture that that emotional side wasn't a factor 1.5 years ago when you came here. So I'm more interested in knowing what it is we can do to make sure that we don't hire people that are just using us for a train. I don't know that he was using us, but effectively it's working out that way. What we can do, one option, I guess, is to do lateral transfers to get people in so they come in qualified.
We do have contract language in place to stop this from happening. Unfortunately, prior to my tenure, that language wasn't enforced.
Okay.
So moving forward, I will make certain that the language that we have within the collective bargaining agreement is enforced, and that should help to reduce some of this.
Okay. Questions, comments?
No, I would move that we approve the request for Michael Saunier to
Second.
transfer.
All those in favor?
All right,
Yep.
Thank you for your time.
thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We got all your stuff? I guess we do. Chief Carrico. I'm getting tired, so you'll be all right.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
A couple weeks back, I came in talking about medical control with Dr. Valkanis. I have submitted to the board the agreement with the town of Mansfield in the letter to cease medical control with Norwood Hospital. Dr. Valkanis is moving forward with his agreement going into Mansfield. Mansfield, I just received an email from the chief. Mansfield received a $86,000 grant to support the medical control endeavors in the town of Mansfield. So I come before you asking to sign the agreement and sign the letter so we can move forward. I would never come before the board if I thought that we were gonna lose something in this decision. By going to medical control through the town of Mansfield, Dr. Valkanis, it's gonna be a benefit for our paramedics and the service that we provide. He's gonna be coming to the department more, we're gonna have more hands-on with him. We're gonna be addressing the critical skills that we might not get in the field, and we'll be able to practice those procedures.
Questions?
None for me.
None for me.
Ready for a motion?
Based on the recommendation from the chief, I would recommend that, I would move that we authorize you to sign the medical services agreement, you being the chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the second thing I've come to talk about was Engine 3, and I thank God that last week I talked about the new Engine 3 and not this week. Engine 3, the existing truck, right now it's sitting in the back parking lot, and I'm looking for direction on how to get rid of it. Maya has deemed the truck out of service, unrepairable. They're willing to give us a check for $4,600 right now and declare it salvage, and they'll process the paperwork to take it away. I had a conversation with Mr. Sorrell on the process. It's all dependent on what the vehicle was worth. I contacted Specialty Vehicles and I said, what would that truck cost? What would the value of that truck if I were to trade it in right now? Operationally, if it worked, $10,000 to $15,000 is what they said I would get on a trade-in. I found a website that talked about fire truck depreciation today. And I looked at the cost back in 1983 when we purchased it. Right now, running through that depreciation percentages, it is in the area of about $13,000 of what it would be worth right now. So we have a...
If it was running.
If it was running, yeah. So right now, we have a vehicle that doesn't work, air brake system is dead, you can't start it. Technically, according to NFPA, it's not a safe vehicle for our firefighters. So I'm looking for direction on getting rid of it. And my recommendation would be to take Maya's $4,600, we could have the check in a couple weeks. They take it away. I could strip the truck down, take everything I need off it, which I've already done pretty much. I've taken the radio out. The light packages aren't worth anything because now everything's LED. You know, it's an older vehicle.
The wheels?
Well, you know what? What's gonna happen is somebody is gonna salvage the truck. Yeah, someone's gonna take that truck and they're gonna dismantle it, and, you know, I would suspect that somebody's gonna put you'll see it plowing and sanding someday. Somebody will take it and work on it, so.
Just picture this fire truck up on blocks.
Yeah. Make a planter.
Questions?
No.
Questions? Motion?
Motion to declare the engine 3 as surplus and authorize the chief to dispose of it.
Actually, I don't even think that this is totally driven by the local bylaw at this point.
Which we changed.
And frankly, basically to make a settlement with the insurance company is really not even within that. So I think there's authority to do that anyway, so.
So we don't even need to vote on this.
Right,
You just
so
get
it's
rid of
just
any
belt and
total
suspenders,
trucks
if
you
anything, to
want.
just approve what he's proposing to do.
Okay,
Vote to approve what he's,
belts and suspenders.
right.
vote to approve what he's proposing to do.
I second.
I'm learning so much about how I should have been doing this last year. All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Chief.
Great, thanks. Let's see, Facilities Director Amy Colleran requests the selectmen vote to sign 2 on-call roofing contracts for services at the Medfield State Hospital. Contractors Almar LLC Medfield and Caffrey Roofing and Painting Company Milford.
I had no questions.
Questions?
Nope, so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Done.
Only took us 16 months to get here.
Let's see, Medfield Cul-
Chris, I'm just curious as to what was so long to,
Oh,
Get the roofs approved.
We did the first RFP last year, just as Jerry was leaving. And
Oh.
then we didn't award the contract in time, so it had to be rebid, and I
oh,
felt more comfortable if we waited for the new facilities
Yeah,
director. We
okay.
didn't realize it was gonna take 8 months for that to happen, so.
The Next item, Gene, if next time we have to move you up on the list unless you enjoyed the entertainment value of, you got nothing better to do, okay, that's.
Same here.
So Medfield Cultural Alliance, Gene Minio, Chair, requests the town contribute $2,500 from the local meals tax fund toward their planned activities. As you recall, we talked about this at the last meeting, but because the expenditure was not on the agenda, this basically is simply a confirmation of what we have already discussed.
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
For the record, we told you we would do it without you.
Yeah.
Okay.
She hasn't,
She was just
I
here to
wanna
make
see,
sure.
I wanna see if she leaves or if she stays, sticks it out. I'm on the second page, but this tends to be the fast page. So, next, town administrator requests the selectmen vote to authorize Chairman Murby to sign the contract with VFIS for 111F insurance for police and fire. I'm surprised Chief Carrico didn't stick around for this one. It's police and fire insurance.
He trusts me. So if you'll recall, we actually have always carried 111F fire insurance for our employees. We did not have it for police. We paid any sort of medical claims out of the existing budget. That seemed to work quite well for a while until we had an exorbitant claim of over $200,000 that we had to pay out of budget. Michael Sullivan and I had an extensive conversation that one of the first things I should do when I took over was institute medical insurance for our police department. We are off cycle with police and fire, but actually it was Deputy Chief Wilhelmy and Carrico who worked together to get the insurance company to coordinate. So we'll actually get a $10,000 check back once we pay this. They'll prorate what we've already paid for this year, which was nice.
Okay.
Given the recommendation from Mike Sullivan, I move that we authorize the chair to sign the contract with VSIS.
Aye. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Done. Next item. Selectmen are requested to vote to approve appropriation transfers for FY 2019 and vote to authorize Chairman Murphy to sign the appropriation transfer forms. This is the end of year.
End of the year
This is the
transfers.
end of the year transfers that we're talking about here, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And they were all signed by the warrant committee at their meeting last night.
Okay, and so that is the second set that I had in here somewhere.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to put it on the proper context, I'll so move that.
Do I hear a second?
Oh, second, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just looking back over these. Yeah, I thought they were fine when I looked through them now.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Next, Selectmen are requested to vote to sign SCRSG contract awards and authorize Maurice Goulet, DPW Director, to sign all related contract documents for FY20 DPW supplies, FY20 water and sewer treatment chemicals, FY20 to FY21 office supplies, FY20 copy paper.
Correct.
The only one of these that I had a clue on was copy paper, because I do buy a lot of copy paper, so I would just move that we authorize the
Second.
director to
All those
sign.
in favor?
Aye.
If you can sign the contract awards tonight, and then Mo will deal directly with Sursage to do the contracts.
That's all-
But
that's
that's all
all
in
in
there.
there.
Yep, you just,
Yep.
they would like the Board of Selectmen to sign the award.
Okay. Pending the budget timeline discussion and to discuss the process for the town administrator evaluation. Do we want to talk about budget timeline again tonight?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Do we want to talk about budget, town administrator evaluation tonight?
Only the deadlines, we're gonna fill out the form, right?
Is the form fine?
See,
Well, the form's
Mark and I have been
not
talking
finalized.
about the process. And you can each fill out a form and give it to the chair, and the chair can compile one form, and then that one form becomes the public document in the evaluation.
Yeah, that's fine.
If that's the process. We had talked about that prior,
Yeah.
just confirming
I
that's the
had-
process we're
If
following.
you're okay with, you guys okay with the form? I was okay with the form.
Yeah, I revised the form, so I thought it was just fine.
Say, I hope you're okay with the
Yeah.
So just so you understand, there was a point in time when if you did this a certain way, the evaluation forms remained, they went to personnel file, they didn't become public records. But that's been changed since the Supreme Judicial Court weighed in on this whole process. So at some point, when you generate this form, it will become a public record.
So, well, let's be clear on that. So each one of us will complete a form. Here's what I would propose that I do. That individual forms that we each complete have room for comments throughout it. And I would suggest that we all develop our own comments for Christine. We sit down with Christine, brief her on our individual form. That is a performance evaluation from each one of us to Christine. Send the forms in to me. I will develop a compiled form. That compiled form will be the compilation of the scores, not the compilation of the comments. So the public record will be it'll be an honest compilation of the scores, but it's not going to have the text that's part of the individual performance evaluations from each one of us. Alternatively, these forms can be the ones we use as the performance evaluation, and I can develop a summary page which compiles those and even provides a few highlighted comments picked from all the detailed comments.
Once the comments go from one Board of Selectmen member to another, they have entered the realm of open meeting and public record. So if there's some way to put it directly to Christine without sharing it with the other two, that's fine.
Well,
The chair can't compile them then?
He can, but then what gets compiled, he literally compiles. He doesn't edit out. He edit in and out and.
Oh, you just,
well,
everything's in.
so what I was proposing to do is to literally compile the scores, the numeric scores, and not do anything else. So the thing I'd compile is just the scores to get to a single aggregate score that's the collective evaluation from all of us.
I would take the comments out of the form completely then and just, if individual selectmen want to meet with her and talk about individually, that's fine.
So, well, that's fine too.
Without sharing that information among yourselves.
Then what I need you to do, Christine, is as we've each sat down with you, make a copy only of the numbers for all of us, get those numbers to me. The only reason I'm not having you do it is that probably wouldn't be appropriate. Send it to me as the chair. I will compile those numbers. That will be the official record of your evaluation. The comments coming from the three of us will be between each one of us and you.
So those are numbers in different categories, so somebody reading it is going,
Yeah.
it's gonna make some sense to some outsider looking
Yeah,
at it.
the categories the categories that she's being
Right.
evaluated on are I think they're intuitive. The real benefit of a performance evaluation is all the comments and the conversation that goes with the comments. So the public record, that to me is more important, but that's not a public record. So whatever I need to do, or whatever any of us need to do to simply record the overall evaluation that will become part of the public record, we'll do that. So it sounds like just give me the numbers for all three of us, and I'll compile them. I think the compilation's probably an average of the three numbers as opposed to a cumulative, adding them all up. That's fine.
Okay.
Because we don't want the review forms to be public. Is that the
That's
idea?
correct. Yeah, they shouldn't. Mark and I have had this debate. The individual performance reviews are not public information. They're private information. So, but I guess we have to administratively, we have to manage it in a way that keeps it private. so I'm okay with that.
But you wouldn't object if I decide to disclose my review?
To
That's
who?
what it is, to the public.
You'd be violating the law because that's Christine's private information.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Public, individual performance evaluations.
Then I'll
are
come
not-
to a meeting and I'll read it out loud at a meeting.
Well,
Maybe you should meet on July 2nd.
the issue is, the performance evaluation is confidential information of the person.
Well,
Well,
that's not,
yeah, I don't think that's
We
true.
went
not since the Bolton decision.
I don't think that's true of a town administrator in the Commonwealth of
We went
Massachusetts.
through, this discussion.
But
too.
again, I'm not having this
18
discussion.
decision,
It's,
so.
if I decide to do that, I'll expose myself to whatever liability there is for doing that. But I don't like the idea that we're gonna have sort of a review that doesn't give the public any sense of our assessment of Christine.
We will. They'll
What's
get
the
the,
point
they'll
of
get
having
the
a
compilation. The point of doing it is have the review with Christine.
No.
The public, individual performance evaluations are not public information. If you've got any laws that say it is, we've gone through this once already, Mark, and I went through with the
Isn't there a
stuff you
Supreme
gave me.
Judicial Court decision?
What?
Isn't there a decision? from
Yes,
the
it's
Supreme
April
Court?
2018,
This is
SJC.
federal law I'm talking about.
No, no,
so we're
no,
talking-
no, this is,
This is federal, I'm talking
This
about
applies just to town administrators, unfortunately.
just to town administrators?
and superintendents
send
of
me the
schools.
Superintendents, yeah.
Yeah.
Send me the citation. I'm
You
genuinely
got the
curious.
decision, I think,
It's the Wayland case, is it Wayland?
yes,
Yeah, yeah, Wayland,
Bolton
yeah.
versus Town of Wayland.
Send
Pretty,
it to me.
pretty
I'll
clear.
send it
Yeah,
to
they
you.
couldn't make it
I'm
clearer.
not quite sure
They
how
actually overrode the Attorney General's office, which was allowing basically the kinds of things you're talking about, which is highly unusual for that.
The issue is it's federal law is what I'm talking about. But okay, I would need to do some work to find out that that's true, and I would like to see the decision if one of you has it.
I haven't. I'll send
I'm
it
a little baffled at how that can, because what that does is that changes what you put down in a performance evaluation, so.
There's a whole lot of places where public and private
Yeah,
employment law,
So if I can see
Diverge.
that, then I'm actually gonna suggest we change your evaluation form.
to you. Okay.
It'll be simpler.
Huh.
The conversation will be more important. It's like, kinda, I would like to see it, but I think 2 years ago, I think I had it right, but who knows?
This was just last year.
April
Yeah, this just
2018.
happened. Yeah.
This was
fairly
2 years
recent.
ago that you and I
Yeah.
jousted
That
over
was,
this.
that
Yeah.
was pre this case.
Yeah, so I would just like to see what the case is,
Right.
that's all. But in light of that, I now think we should change the form. I wrote a form to be helpful to you, I didn't write a form to be a public document. Or alternatively, Christine, you can just take the form and change it to the format that you would be most comfortable being broadcast to everybody. My suggestion would be take the comment sections out of all of it, and it'll just be a score sheet.
Okay. Mark and I can talk about that.
I think you're right, the simpler you keep it,
Yeah.
if you're gonna use it at all.
The alternative of not using it would be what? Just do a verbal evaluation with no record?
Well, it still has to be done in an open session, so, I mean, you're faced with either
Well, no, we could each-
basically
we could
something
each
that's so
individually
so
talk.
superficial that it doesn't accomplish anything
Yeah.
versus,
I mean, but my point is, none of this, I would still think all three of us would have a conversation with you, and that's not an open session, because it's not the three of us doing anything. What I'm getting at is, so are you saying that actually if we wanted to, we could just do that and never have any record at all, or do we need a record to prove we did an evaluation?
I think you owe it to the taxpayers and the residents to do an evaluation of your town administrator.
It's in your
But
contract.
I'm talking
It's
the
also in
law
your
here,
contract.
I'm talking legal
Yeah.
here. When you said make it simple,
the law is that an evaluation of a town administrator or superintendent of schools or somebody in that position has to take place in a public meeting, open meeting. There's a separate issue of public records, but that's only a subsidiary issue here. It's
so,
all transparency. And I'm not, I've sat on committees, selection committees and all, and I understand the constraints. I mean,
and I'm trying not to fight I'm not trying to fight any problems here, I'm just trying to understand. So we would have, at one of our Board of Selectmen's meetings, we would have the evaluation of Christine.
Right.
We would have some collective discussion of that. Perhaps that would be captured in notes or minutes. And
Right.
that would constitute the only public record that we need.
Right.
So then the form that we have is a form that if any one of us wants to sit down and talk to you directly, we would be free to use as an individual, giving you our thoughts, just like we could walk in with a sheet of paper with nothing on it and just a bunch of comments and have a conversation.
As long as you don't talk among yourselves and
Yeah.
and she doesn't
Yeah, that's
relay.
fine. So the form is moot. If you want to use it, use it. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. I guess I would suggest that the categories in the form might be useful for the three of us to refer to before the open meeting that we have where we discuss Christine's performance. And we let the minutes constitute the public record of Christine's performance evaluation. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Fine with me.
Okay with you?
Sure.
Okay with you?
Yep.
Okay with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a messenger here.
I
I
know, I
don't
know.
like the process.
I know.
I've been part of a fight,
Okay,
but
so it's
we're
okay
not
with me.
being heard by the legislature, so even though they've managed to continue to,
So speaking for myself,
Yeah,
I will try to sit down and give you feedback as an individual.
Thank you.
And presumably any comments I have in an open meeting would be consistent with what you heard from me, and perhaps the other two selectmen would choose to do something similar.
I will as well.
Thank you.
I'll think about it.
All right. Do we have a time that we would like to schedule that?
I think it's on the calendar for July 23rd, but
July 20th?
Yes, but we
we're not meeting July
we're not-
23rd.
we need
so-
to figure out what
Right.
day we're meeting in
Okay.
after the 9th, so.
I
Okay.
think the second meeting in July.
Yeah, second meeting in July, we just haven't
Yeah,
set the
and
date.
so I think
At a
we-
minimum, I'd like to go over the goals we set for you,
I agree.
and at least in the public meeting, go over the goals and whether those goals have been met
Yes, and
or not.
I'm working on a document to
Yeah.
give you, that
Okay.
updates you where we are in that
For the
process.
next thing,
Yes.
yeah, which is what, from my view, is,
I think especially in the first six-month
Yeah.
evaluation, that's probably fair to say that's a core of the discussion. That's fair. Yeah.
One of the things that I actually did in my life was when I was on a new member of the Board of Trustees of LaSalle College, I got taken to an Association of Governing Boards meeting, which is it's like the Maya or MA for colleges and universities. It's the overarching group for all the colleges and universities in the country. And some big name was coming in and presenting his how to evaluate college presidents. And the only thing I can really remember was that it was the important evaluations with the second and seventh years. You do more involved evaluations in the second and seventh years. The second one is to confirm good choices or to accelerate the end of.
what's the seventh year? Why does that kick
I
in?
don't know. I don't remember now, but
Ties into-
for long term, I think.
ties
But a lot
into
of the college
cicadas.
presidents leave after 10 years, so I don't know.
All right, let's see, on the consent calendar, we have the Friends of the Medfield Library request permission to place a sandwich board Wednesday through Saturday at the transfer station advertising their half-price book sale, which takes place on the last Saturday of the month. The request is for each month that a book sale is planned, and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation requests permission to conduct their annual charity bicycle ride through a part of Medfield on Saturday, October 5th, 2019, and they provided the proposed route, which I think is consistent with what they've done in the past.
So I like the Friends of the Library, because basically their request is an infinite request. It's just ongoing.
Right.
So that
at their
saves us
discretion
from-
whenever they plan a book sale.
I think it has to be each month.
Well, it is each month, but it just goes on and on and on.
Just each
On the
month
last
that a
Saturday.
book sale
Last
is
Saturday
planned.
month, yes.
So if they don't
Yes.
plan a book sale, then they don't have to.
You know, and they can only do it on the last Saturday of the month.
Yeah, yeah. I would move the license and consent calendar, huh?
I second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Okay, that passes. Approval of meeting minutes, I'm going to ask us to defer this. I just didn't get to any of the meeting minutes.
May I make a request, Christine and Mark? You can throw something at me if this is inappropriate. I don't see any need to wait until our packets before the meetings as the minutes are prepared. It would certainly help
Sure.
if I got them as their drafts. I'd like them as Word documents so that I can give you a markup of them. and then we can get edits back before, I don't think as long as it's not shared among each other, we can each give you our edits. To the extent there's any irreconcilable edits, we can work those out in a meeting. But it was a dump of stuff last week. I got through 3 of them. I know the 2nd and the 23rd and March 19th I got through, and I think I'd given you a markup on a couple of these others. But it would just be helpful if they came as they come, and we can get them back to you. And
So that's what I was looking for. The real old ones, is that stuff that got sent out a long, long time ago? So I really do have to go all the way back to find those, okay. I wasn't sure.
We can resend them.
I was, probably have them. It's just that I wasn't sure whether there was an email with them, because there's so many came in.
So let me just ask our counsel, is it a violation of the open meeting law for us to share our edits, suggested edits of the?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
and it's actually been addressed specifically.
we would never do such a thing, and we will not do
And if
so
we
going
accidentally
forward.
did it, we would pay no attention to what somebody. All right, town administrator update.
The town hall is going to be closed on July 5th. Given that we're meeting on the 9th and with some staff being on vacation and the holiday closure, we're going to need to post the agenda for the 9th next week. So if you have any suggestions of what we're looking for on the 9th, we'll take them earlier rather than later.
Okay, and the 9th is a date that I can't, I'm out in Pittsburgh, but I think it would make sense just to go ahead with it.
We'll keep it as a light agenda. It's usually,
We're gonna cover everything Gus might object to that.
I wasn't gonna tell anybody you weren't gonna be here, so you just
Carol,
let it
get in
out.
touch with them.
We could always have remote participation.
Well, I could, I'm in Pittsburgh, and I probably could do that, but if it's a light agenda, I mean, if it looks like it's something that I should be on, I could probably do that.
Okay.
But,
Having done it, Gus, it's a wonderful experience.
yeah, I'm sure it is. It's, I'm actually not in Pittsburgh. The 8th, I'm in Pearland, Texas. So I'll actually have, yeah, I could do that. Anything else?
I think that's all I had.
Okay. We're still, Board of Selectmen action item list is still being pushed off, I assume?
We're pushing that off. It's actually on the calendar to do over the summer, so we'll
Okay.
get to that. Oh, actually, I did have one thing. This Friday, we're having a small reception for
yeah.
Deputy Chief Wilhelmy. If anybody would like to stop down in the morning to say
Is it
goodbye.
10
10
a.m., I
10 a.m.
believe? I have a conflict, but,
10 a.m. Saturday.
Friday.
Friday.
yep. Okay, Selectmen's report. Mike?
I don't think I have anything, actually.
Pete?
So I went to the MMA's Mass Selectmen's Association Leadership Conference a couple Saturdays ago, and it was it's always very interesting information. Jeff Beckwith brought us up to date on state stuff. There's like $1 billion of surplus in the budget this year, although the May figures hadn't been out, and that was unusual that they hadn't come out by the time of this was June 8 when we were meeting, so he didn't know what that meant. But in general, let's see, in the House and the Senate are fighting over how much to increase the budgets. Although it looks like for us, in terms of education funding, they've agreed on $30 a student, so that's what we're going to get. The MMA is trying to index the Chapter 90 funds. State doesn't seem to be signing on to that. There was interesting discussion about 3 versus 5 member select boards. With 5, you can get more done, as 2 people can actually talk to each other. You can have subcommittees. They actually said the town administrator evaluation form, UMass Amherst form, is a good one. Too late for us. Annual town meeting efficiency, consent agenda, which is what we're already doing, group dismissals, we're already doing, limit to comments to 5 minutes, I think that he does that.
That
Childcare,
doesn't apply to Selectmen, does it?
electronic voting, and it was interesting because somebody said no, that it's faster without it. Somebody said yes, because you get secret ballots. Went to a subcommittee on consensus building, and it was just
There was no consensus.
active listening, basically.
Nobody could get along.
It's just really personal relationships. Regionalization was interesting. there's a lot of areas like that I hadn't thought of, like the IT, for instance, they said was really ripe for it. HR, things that I hadn't necessarily thought of. Interestingly, I sat next to a woman who's a selectman from, new selectman from Ashland, and it's her family that owns the house up on Harding Street that I've been talking about the town trying to buy. She and her husband were good friends of Mike Sullivan. I didn't know that they were such good friends that he did a reading at their wedding, and they didn't know he died, so that was a little difficult for her to hear. But so she's going to, and there's some illness going on in the family, but when the illness is over, she'll see if the family's interested in doing a deal with the town, if the town's interested in doing that. I talked to another selectman from Wakefield, 7-member board. It's the only 7-member board in the state. And Wakefield has an assistance to seniors who've been in town a long time, like Sudbury does, where they set aside a certain amount of property tax relief, basically. The other residents in town basically cover some of the property taxes for seniors and they use the circuit breaker qualification as the issue. You qualify through longevity in town, income qualification. I think one of the towns has an asset requirement too. But there are ways of doing it so that it's something to look at if we want to actually encourage seniors to stay in town, make it a little more financially viable for the less advantaged seniors. The suicide prevention people met, and they're mainly focused on getting that money that Andrea was getting from the hospitals to be able to pay for the interface for the next year. $13,000 is due in October. Cultural Alliance, I went to Gene's dad's brass band up at the State Hospital. It was a really cool event. I mean, just, things scattered around the common in front of the Lee Chapel, really nicely done. And then the Medfield Foundation Legacy Fund had a meeting last night, and it's on its way to the $1 million endowment. We're basically a fifth of the way there. We're working a new initiative towards the businesses in town to get on board in terms of becoming founders as well. So that's everything. Thank you.
Well, it's a good thing Pete's doing stuff, Mike, because I don't have much of a report other than when he was at that regional selectmen's meeting. I went to the Troop 10 Eagle Court. So a nice, they did it at 11 in the morning, which in some ways is a little nice, on a Saturday. It's a little nicer if the Eagle Court's at 11 rather than at 1 or 2, just from the standpoint of the weekend. But so, nice ceremony. There were two scouts, so it wasn't overly long to get through all that. So that was, and I think that's the only report. The only other thing is a case of poison ivy on both arms from having worked in the yard last weekend. That's about it. Mark?
Yeah, just a quick one. I don't know if you've noticed, but there has been litigation filed, again, challenging the school education formulas. So we'll see how that plays out. I strongly believe the SJC was poised once before to determine that local property-based was unconstitutional under the state constitution, but they backed off. So we'll see what happens this time around.
And the two information items that we got was that we got our confirmation that we're in compliance with the housing production plan for, I guess, confirming another year of safe harbor, Mike?
Yes, we lost 13 days on this one. I'm not happy about it. We won't lose the 13 days next year, I'm sure, right?
We are going to try.
Yes.
13, you lost 13 days?
Yes, our certification actually ran through May 23rd, 2019, but due to the timing of the ZBA approval of this, it's now going to run from May 10th. So there's 13 days that overlap in the 2 years of safe harbor certification.
Yeah,
so.
too quickly, huh?
We never do that. We weren't expecting that.
This is like when you get your car inspected and you let the month end and then you go like 2 weeks later. So if the ZBA, everybody thought we were going to have it and then we just kind of didn't act for a week, we could push it in the other direction.
Well, they were up on their deadline for how it works, so I'm not that
when I was
ashamed
on
about it, but.
When I was on the ZBA, one of the decisions that I wrote was the one for the water treatment plant in the middle of the Charles River along Route 109, and there were supposedly volatile organic chemicals in the drinking water, and it was
Yep.
cancer causing, and so that I wrote the decision the next day. And apparently Ken wasn't ready to go. He didn't expect the ZBA to do it right away, so.
And the other item that we have responded to a complaint that handicap parking spaces at the center were not in compliance with the law, and we received a letter from Gary Pelletier that outlined the actions the town is taking to make sure that the parking spaces are properly marked, properly signed, and I understood from Christine that given that we were painting the stripes for the handicap spots, we painted the stripes for the whole parking lot, so.
Yes.
Let's hope that doesn't encourage people to file more complaints to get things done. You had down at the bottom, next meeting, next month's meeting's 9th and 30th. Is it 9th and 30th or 9th and 23rd?
We hadn't really decided on the second date, so
Okay.
I'll have to email and figure out
That's
what.
great, okay.
We may have to go off on the Tuesday for the second.
I think what it
to
boils
figure it
down to is one of the dates you can't make and one of the
Yeah.
dates I can't make, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do three meetings and, August doesn't even work. I think that's it.
You have a,
Oops, yes, Carol.
Just to clarify, you were talking about appointing boards, are we supposed to get an email to request being reappointed for Board of Health, or?
So the
Thank
chair.
you for letting me ask.
The chairman of the Board of Health has the committee questionnaire, which I believe the Board of Health has started filling out, and they'll send back.
And then, do you come in front of the Board of Selectmen to get reappointed, or?
They'll reappoint you. You'll let your chairman know if you're interested in being reappointed. I don't think you're up this year.
Yeah, they
so
have
which is
3
probably
years.
why you have 3-year
there's only
terms.
one of them up, I think.
So which is probably why you haven't heard from her. And then that'll be submitted, and if the person who has requested to be reappointed does not need to be present to be reappointed.
Okay, I just.
Sorry, it's a lot of words to say no. You don't have to be here.
I appreciate it, because maybe sometime too, you can come to our meetings now that.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Anybody have anything else? Motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good night.